All right. Okay, dokie. Welcome, everybody. Nice to see everybody here this evening. It's been a while since we've had this many people in the room, so it's good to have folks come, and you can stay as long as you'd like. I'm going to call the Moab City Council meeting to order for February 28th at 6 o'clock p.m. And we'll start with the pledge. And Joe, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Joe. Looks like we have some citizens to be heard, which is our first item of business. And Joe, we'll start with you.
Oh,
If you'd like to have a seat here and speak into the mic.
it's all right. We're going to be talking about the Aggie situation. And since I'm on the advisory council, I have to go up there once in a while. And I have to tell you, that intersection is very dangerous.
Mhm.
And I strongly recommend when this construction starts, for the town hall, that the city get a county plan for a trigger light there. In other words, it only changes when somebody's there.
Great, thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
I think that UDOT is looking into that. It's my understanding. But thanks.
That's very good.
Yeah. Mhm. All right, next we have Pete Gross.
I was afraid you were calling first. Or second.
I guess you've already stated my name. I'm here to speak about noise. 17 months ago, this body passed a new noise ordinance, which I was totally in support of. And I'd like to point out too, that part of that was because literally about 300 households have posted yard signs like this. And that's because the noise is driving people nuts. And they probably represent 300 households. There's probably multiple people in those households. And I also have friends and neighbors who did not want to put up a sign, totally in support because they were concerned about retribution from neighbors and other people. So it's definitely a huge problem. Recently, I've noticed an uptick in pretty extreme motor vehicle noise, not from the usual suspect, but from sports cars or sports car looking like vehicles with spoilers on the back.
Mhm.
And in the newly passed noise ordinance, there's a provision about plainly audible. And these vehicles are plainly audible, not just from, your property line, but from easily half a mile away above the sound level of semis, which are pretty darn loud. I've measured them at 80 decibels. And if they're a half mile away, that plainly audible above the sound level of decibels, just doing the physics of that, the inverse square law, they could easily be well in excess of 100 decibels. So I think it's unambiguous that they rise to the level of plainly audible as intended in the noise ordinance. And so the reason I'm before you here is I'm hoping we could see some enforcement of the noise ordinance. And specifically, it would be great to have enforcement of motor vehicles that are not part of the usual suspects, because the Blue Ribbon Coalition is suing us due to our efforts to mitigate the noise problem. And this would provide evidence for we're not discriminating against a particular activity, we're discriminating against what anybody of any activity generates. And I would also add to that people feel assaulted in their homes. When you can't sleep, when you're stressed, I obsess over this, it drives me nuts. I spent hours thinking about what am I going to say here? And I hate public speaking, but I came here because it's driving me crazy. Anyway, I thank you. I hope we can see some enforcement of the plainly audible provision of the noise ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Pete. Sarah.
Hello again. If you guys have not read Doug McMurdo's excellent article about the tragedy of Christian Wright and the things he did in the community, I highly advise you to read it. It's very in-depth. I know Kristen a little bit, not super well, but he is someone who is suffering extreme. He's on the extreme end of suffering. The noise has exacerbated any issues he may have already had. And many in the community are also suffering due to the unbearable noise pollution. It's unbearable. A lot of people walk around in tears, they're gonna move. So a lot of people are moving and it's draining away of its heart and its soul, which is a shame. It's kind of keeping some tourists away who might come here wanting to enjoy a quiet, beautiful area, and they're not getting that. I personally feel as if I'm held hostage by the noise. I'm afraid of bullies and I'm afraid of being bullied. And I don't like to speak out, but I'm one of the people that's looked into where can I move to. I don't want to leave this place. It's in my heart and my soul, but it's unbearable. And it's not in every community where it's like that. And some people might be happy if I left. I'm not really pointing at you, Caitlin, but I think it's time that we have a super deep conversation. I was trying to be funny, Joe. About, you know, when I'm out walking quietly, I'm not bothering any other human being. I'm trying to be really gentle on the earth. But we're forced to endure noise pollution, which is a known danger for people's physical health, mental health. And Christian is a sensitive, kind human who just was driven insane by the noise. And that's an extreme. And I know he's threatened people, and that's very frightening. Anyone who's been threatened knows that. But if we don't address it, there's gonna be more things happening. Sadly. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else? Okay, we will move on to our presentations for the evening. We'll start with legislative updates. We need to get Casey and Nathan on the call. Okay.
To jump on.
Just so everybody knows where we were, there's Nathan, and did you text Casey? Okay, he'll probably come on in a minute. It's been a busy week. It's the last week of the legislative session, which is typically the time when a lot of things get thrown in and that we have to scramble to make sure that we are on top of what's happening up there. So we have 3 days left and we've made some progress. But Carly, do you want to go ahead and just
Let me pull up my
keep going?
notes here.
I've got some notes too.
Casey's not on board yet. It's okay. Nathan and I can speak up for a little bit until he gets there. Okay, where to start? Really, there are, you want to do SB 271. Okay. SB 271, I can't remember the name of it. It's like home ownership requirements, amendments, something like that. This is sponsored by Senator McKell. It has passed through Senate committee and through the Senate. It's now in House rules. This is a bill that is apparently a response to an ordinance passed by Park City to regulate what we're calling fractional ownership. Companies that come into communities and purchase a home and then kind of sell it to a bunch of different people. And they operate a lot like timeshares, but it's an ownership model rather than a user model. So things like our short-term rental policy would not apply to these dwellings. This is probably our biggest priority. There are two that kind of rose to the top as the biggest priority. It had a lot of momentum in committee, seemed like it had a lot of leadership support, including from Ivory Homes and from the property rights. No, who is Chris Kyler with, Nathan? Home Builders. He's Home Builders Association.
So Chris Kyler and Mike Ostermiller are partners.
Yeah, it appears.
Chris represents, I believe, the Realtors Association, and Mike represents the Home Builders Association. But they both work together. But both organizations appear to be supporting this bill.
So we testified during that committee hearing, so did the league in opposition. Park City did not sure why. They were aware of it, but chose not to. Our approach with this is just to see if we can get some sort of carve out, especially for rural communities like ours that could just we have limited housing stock. This could be really devastating to these communities, especially over the long term. So we're trying to negotiate a carve out. I have seen language for a substitute, and I do want Casey to speak to it because he sent it my way and I didn't think that it hit the mark. It seemed to memorialize what we already can do, making it clear that it wouldn't impact how we regulate internal ADUs. That's already true. Short-term rentals, already true. We didn't need that clarification. And there was one other IADUs, or yeah, things that we already have a lot of authority to regulate. So I didn't get the clarification that I was looking for.
I can just add that my understanding is that that language was added in response to comments the Utah League of Cities and Towns and the Utah Housing Coalition have been making, but I don't think any of it was in response to specific
Us.
discussions you've been having. Yeah.
So not where we want it to be. It's going to be extremely hard to stop. Our best hope is probably to amend it to get a substitute.
Right.
But, and I guess Casey can speak to it when he jumps on.
Also, Ben and I did testify at the Senate hearing, and I also spoke with Senator Hinkins, who's the chair of the standing committee. He opposed the bill, which was great. I also talked to him again today about another bill and asked perhaps if they could include some language that would exclude 4th, 5th, and 6th counties in resort communities. I don't know if he'll do that or not, but he understood what our concerns are. And so hopefully we can get support from him on that regard. And then when Casey gets on, we can ask him more about that.
And we can confirm, my understanding is he voted for it in committee, but he's now saying he'll vote against it on the floor.
He voted against it.
He voted against it in committee.
Okay,
Below.
must be a
He
different
was a
bill I'm
lone
getting
nay
confused
vote.
about.
And
That
I-
might be for the did.
That was for the did.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks.
But I also spoke with Representative Lyman about it, and he was also very sympathetic and supported our concerns with that, knowing that our community is a little unique and that we'll see how that vote turns out. But it looks like this is moving forward, and if we can get some language in there that eliminates our situation and other small rural counties and resort communities, that would be great.
There's hope for it simply because the industry interested in running this bill, who's pushing the bill, aren't really interested in Moab. They're interested in markets like St. George and Park City. I think our housing stock just might not be what they have in mind. It's like those really luxury, expensive multi-bedroom homes. So that's why we're kind of hopeful. It's also maybe good news that maybe there isn't quite the target on our back yet. Of course, we know that things change in our little communities. So 271, hopefully when Casey gets on, he can talk about his latest discussions with Senator McKell. We kind of mentioned this earlier. Any questions, by the way? And feel free to interrupt me. Yeah.
So as I understood it from previous conversations, that this is perhaps preempting a challenge to Park City's ordinance on constitutional grounds.
Yes.
Is there any possibility that if you're proposing language for a carve out, that it actually is more positive in supporting the carved out community's ability to do this, rather than just saying that we're exempt from the prohibition?
Yeah. Wait, I don't know if I understand your question. Can you ask that again? I just was like watching Casey get on. It was very distracting. Yeah. Right. And Casey, we're just talking about SB 271. I gave the update that what would happen to it, and that I wasn't thrilled with like the substitute language that I've seen because it doesn't really address our concerns. Do you have any update?
You're muted.
You're muted, Casey.
You?
There you are.
All right, there we go. I do have an update. Right now, the update is not super positive. It's just that we're getting some pushback, and the idea that we would be, potentially carved out in some meaningful way from the Realtors Association and from the sponsor, to be quite honest with you. His response to me was, look, I want to help you. I like Moab. I've worked, with him in the past on OHV stuff. He is not antagonistic toward Moab. I will say that. He's been a friend of ours. But the challenge that we have is we do have him basically saying, I want to know what's the policy argument for carving out, Moab? Because how is it different other than just that there's not currently a market for this particular, potential user? How is that any different than, put that in?
Hi, Dan.
How is that any different than what we're dealing with in Park City, except for there's not an ordinance that has created a problem. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to make sure. Okay, so anyway, I mean, the answer right now is that the sponsor has indicated a willingness to work with us, but I've yet to have him respond favorably when I have brought up the idea of what about just carving us out geographically. What about just putting some kind of arbitrary cap related to some number that seems to make some sense or something? And his answer is, I want a policy argument. Give me something other than just because I'm trying to help Moab. So that's the challenge we're facing, and what I'm looking for and hoping for is something that we can come up with creatively to come up with a good policy argument for this. So we are still working on that.
So what about, and I don't know if this is policy, but I think the big concern for us is the limited stock that we have, and we are rural. Park City has access to Salt Lake City and other bigger communities up there in Summit County. And for us, it's like, we don't have the housing available anywhere else but in our community, rural and remote.
Yeah.
Right. And so for that's our big concern, is like, we don't want homes to be bought up to use for timeshare type purposes when we don't even have enough housing stock right now for our employees
Mhm.
and our local people. So I don't know
So
if that's like
this is
policy.
oh,
Go
this
ahead,
is Dan. Can I add something here just to understand this? I mean, Casey and I were talking about this, prepping for this call. One question is this a problem in Moab right now where you are either regulating this today or plan to regulate it tomorrow? Or is it just we're worried about what might be in the future?
The answer is that we have a housing problem now that's extreme. We don't have much more local housing stock to give up. We're already operating at a deficit. And so many of the land use issues that we have are reactive, and it would be really great if we could actually be proactive when it comes to a known problem that is gobbling up communities in other gateway and resort towns.
Right.
No.
We were looking at creating a regulation this year.
Yeah.
It was part of the council's priority.
Yeah, and I think my big concern is that Picasso is kind of the organizations that's spearheading really a brand new industry.
Mhm.
And so there might be kind of copycats that aren't solely targeting these high-end luxury units, but eventually will be starting, like, because at that point, if you can get, let's say, like a $400,000 or $500,000 home instead of a $2 million home and split that up into 8 units, then you can sell that to kind of more middle America. Like, here's a vacation home that you have for like $40,000, $50,000 rather than having to shell out $500,000 yourself. And I think there is going to be development happening in Moab, and it's just an additional competitor in an already overly competitive market.
Mhm.
Sure.
It broadens the market to a certain degree that, like, we're already kind of having to compete with the world. We have nationals from outside the country that are looking to purchase vacation homes out here, and our local workforce is dwindling. Like, our ability to maintain essential service staffing is really restricted. And kind of with some of those like higher end things that, like, cost of living goes up, and I get where he's coming from. I guess if they're saying this is unconstitutional, how can you give the carve out for something that they consider to be unconstitutional?
Right. And I think there is a disagreement that's been going on about the constitutionality of regulating, whether we're regulating ownership or use. And that's sort of, I think Park City is saying we're regulating use and we're allowed to do that. And then I think the other side is saying, no, you're regulating ownership and you're prohibited to do that. And our answer to that is simply then send it to study and to committee.
Right.
We'll agree maybe not
Yeah.
to pass an ordinance. And then, and maybe it's true at the end of the day, we feel like there's a constitutional issue. And we try to find another way to sort of ameliorate this problem. It's this
The
brand new
challenge
business.
we have, oh, sorry. I was
No,
gonna say
go
that one other challenge I probably should have said leading into this conversation is that having the conversations I've had with Senator McKell to this point, as I mentioned, he really is not trying to roll over the top of Moab. He's made that really clear to me, but at the same time, he intends to pass this bill. He's very committed to it, and I don't think
further.
I don't think pushing
think
this
he
is-
has
Yeah.
received meaningful support from leadership in both House and Senate. This is going to be there's no such thing as a truly must pass bill. People say that's true, but this is one that does not just from McKell, but has a lot of support up the chain of command.
Yeah. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be one of those things where we're going to have to deal with it rather than just ask for, another year to work on it. And so.
But I would say this, he's already been willing to carve out any regulations for ADUs, for internal ADUs, and for short-term rentals. So he's carved those out. So to something Casey was saying at the beginning, he's expressed a willingness to listen to and carve something out. I think, and this is something Casey and I need to think about more, but I guess we're asking if you have any thoughts, a policy argument that we can give him that can, gives him a reason to carve out.
I've got a few ideas. We have Musselman's bill, for example, which is talking about a pilot program with percentages. And if nothing else, if they're insistent on passing something, one thing to consider would be percentages, because honestly, some of the dialogue, and make no mistake, there has been a lot of misleading conversation happening, especially in committees, about how Park City tried to stop private property and the ability of, Americans to get together and buy property. And we are not arguing with that. We understand private property in Utah. However, a lot of the messaging has been, well, Senator, you love Moab and you love Moab and you love Moab, and we would love to get together and buy a house together in Moab. And the problem is there is so much focus on the ability of individuals to get together and own second homes when we have so many people in this community that those people are going to want to have serve their dinners and lead their guided tours who can't own a first home or rent a first home. And that's one of my primary problems with this is that, and if you want to talk about the impact on housing, that is huge. And our situation in Moab and that of other rural resort communities is very similar. And so that's part of what needs to be understood. They're just breaking our backs. And I don't know who they think is going to serve them when they come to town. I mean, and I would just add, as much as they fear California, there are a lot of Californians too, who are going to be happy to buy some second and third homes. So just saying, and I say that as a Californian.
Yeah, and I know you guys, look very closely at, your housing, your stock of affordable housing. And so I wonder if when Senator McKell is asking for a policy argument, if really what we're looking for is some kind of factorization that takes all of that into account and says, when we hit a certain level, then it triggers the opportunity for these type of things to these type of ownerships to occur to a greater extent or something like that. So something like that is, percentage. Right.
Whatever.
So something like a percentage, but that's why I say that's the kind of the policy driven argument rather than just saying, we just want to be carved out, and
we could provide data. We could provide data on how many second homes there are, but a specific question for our community and for transparency with people in Utah needs to be, are we talking about a percentage of homes that has to be owned in our community as second homes, period? Or are we talking about a percentage of homes that has to be owned by the Vacasa Corporation?
Yeah.
No, I think that's those are two different things. I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to or want to call out a specific, it's not possible to call out a specific corporation in statute like that. What we try and do is come up with something that just, that is actually policy that says, if you are, if you're a resort community and you have certain, characteristics, then you're treated slightly differently based upon those characteristics, and your requirement to allow for these, changes, or is there's a factorization that takes place, a percentage that takes place that then limits to a certain extent the number of these that can be utilized. So that's that's the process that I think we have to kind of think through. And I know we're asking you to do it in 24 hours or 48 hours, but I'm sorry, that's just like, that is welcome to the process. And
Casey, I think we should ask him about a percentage. If it's something like we have to allow it in like 10% of our residential zones, or I know he doesn't like it kept in commercial. That's what triggered this when Park City did it. But I think if he's open to a percentage in the zones, I don't like the cap is a little hard because it could change so easily. I get that. That's like a hard number, and they're not going to accept that. But like just so and the policy argument is this: we're not trying to stamp out this use. We just don't want it overtaking our neighborhood. So we want to make sure that there are workforce available homes while we're also like making room for them in the market.
Yeah, and I wish there was time to study so we had like a better opportunity to support this argument. But I think potentially even like what percentage of all residential properties in a county is non-primary residents? Because to a certain degree, like if you're, and I don't know, maybe I guess I can do some Googling tonight to see if there's some sort of studies that have been done that I'm sure there is some sort of threshold at which if like whatever percentage of a community is made up of either second homeowners or short-term rentals, that we're in that situation that Ronnie was talking about, where the local primary residents aren't really able to support themselves or support the industry or support those like second homeowners and everything like that.
And you guys have, sorry, finish up.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you have this off your tax rolls, don't you? You know how many are primary or secondary homes, correct?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
The county has
So-
that. I just don't know how we kind of come up with a percentage based off of that
Right.
information that Patel will enjoy. Because it's not going to be good
Well,
for
this
him.
is where if we have some data, maybe this is a little bit of finger in the wind, and apologies for that, but it's also kind of where we are. But if we have some data demonstrating here's where we are in Moab from a primary secondary home situation, and we're concerned about secondary home situations, right? Because that's where you're going to have multiple ownership, right?
Okay,
And maybe we can just come up with some threshold that we feel comfortable with and just propose it.
okay, yeah. I'd like to suggest that there's other bills that we need to talk about. So
Yeah.
Casey, why don't Carly and you and me and Nathan, if you want to be a part of this, kind of see what we can come up with tomorrow.
Okay.
ASAP.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, we will.
Sounds good.
And just to give you a heads up on kind of how things are moving, what's going to happen over Senate's passing bills. So we're now talking about a bill that we're going to be dealing with, making changes to in the House, and then having to come back. So, don't panic. The Senate's going to pass, that bill's in the House, and it's going to be amended, and it's going to be amended in the House and have to come back to the Senate for concurrence for what the House is going to do with the bill. So we'll still be negotiating essentially through Senator McKell, but we're dealing now with the changes that have to be made in the House. So
Okay.
okay.
Thanks. Yep.
What other I have on my list? The next bill would be SB 175. But did we skip 406? HB 406?
We have not talked about 406 quite yet. We're jumping around. We can do
Okay.
406.
Well, just a quick update on that. So that bill, HB 406, I understand there's concerns with lines 1140 through 1147. What I would just say is that this bill has been negotiated by the league to death. Really, I mean, and is really
Coming on 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long process. The league's been involved from the outset, and what that particular section does is it requires the city to disclose that there's a down zone occurring via development agreement, and also restricts the city's ability to use development agreement to down zone. So while I understand the concern related to it, this is not one that at this point is really changeable. I mean, it's kind of,
Yeah, this
It's-
is a bill that's been this session. I've never seen this before, but it's a bill that leadership teams, the sponsors have decided is unamendable.
and there've been attempts to make changes to it that have been like pushed back and said, nope, there's other bills that you're going to have to use. You're putting this in some other bill, because this bill is agreed upon and moving. So there's no,
Right.
there-
And I
there's no
believe-
likelihood of change there.
The league voted
For-
in support
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yep, that's right.
And hopefully it's not too problematic. I mean, the concept is if you're going to down development agreement, you just have to make sure that the developer understands that they're losing rights the other ones have for their zoning.
We kind of lost you a little
Yeah, I
bit,
can't
Dan.
hear you, Dan.
But
Oh,
I
I was
think-
just gonna say,
All right, so SB 175, there was a question about the funding and how the formula works for the funding. It is a formula, by the way. So SB 175, it's 50% by mileage, and the way that mileage is calculated is mileage of the county and city roads divided by the total city and county roads statewide. That's 50% of the formula, and the other 50% is pro rata based on population. So, I don't think you're going to build, any roads across the river probably with that kind of money, but it's something. So it's going to be at least helpful.
it wasn't intended for new
Is this,
construction, but it
Casey,
was
this is like
intended-
ongoing money, right? It's not just.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not just a one-time thing.
That's
good.
right. So there is a one-time bump in the bill of $40 million one time, but then the ongoing aspect to it is tied to a $2 increase in registration fees for cars. And so that aspect of it, the more cars purchased, there's always going to be that $2, assuming that we're always still buying cars. So I don't think we have any concerns about that. So SB 158, the water exaction bill, sounds like we're okay with that bill. That's another one of McKell's bill.
That one, sorry, Casey,
And-
we were really worried about 2 weeks ago. It has been amended and now we're basically neutral on it.
Right.
It's something we can live with. It'll be great.
Right.
It's not great, but it's fine.
And then SB 295, I always end with the good news, right? We were able to kill that bill in the Senate today. So that bill is dead. We actually had some significant involvement in that. So
Thank
we
you.
were happy to be able to help out there.
Yep.
That would have been
Do you guys briefly want to explain to the public in a sentence or two what that did?
what it did.
I can,
it-
but
I don't know if they-
yeah,
Yeah.
The idea, what it did, it's pretty good, Ronnie. I know that was
I
unintended.
can, but you guys are more on top of the law, so.
Yeah, it was that was a dedicated infrastructure district that would basically establish a local district. Jump in here, you guys, that would allow developers to create their own district. They could appoint themselves. There would be no elected officials involved. So basically, it was giving them a lot of power to manage their own developments.
Giving them sovereign power, including eminent domain and taxation. With
Basically,
Yeah,
no-
basically,
probably the
yeah.
biggest, most significant thing was the ability for them to basically create their own increment and then use that to build their development.
Right.
So it was an interesting idea and a really significant, powerful tool. And there were, I think, a lot of developers salivating over it, quite honestly. But
They
it's
were.
certainly not ready for prime time.
I'll just rephrase that in a different way for people, because I know you guys are lay people, but basically created a new political subdivision that was like a special service district, but they would have been able to both tax US residents and also use eminent domain without any form of elected representation. So basically a very clear-cut example of taxation without representation.
Well,
Right.
and to use the future tax that would be generated to actually bond against and build, the infrastructure for their development, which is, again, if you understand how development works and the costs associated with it, that's an awesome tool It's just not something that is typically in control of a developer to be able to make those decisions, and has never been previously.
As Senator Hinkins said to me today, it's a huge overreach. So.
Yeah, even in a legislature that typically is very, very friendly to developers, this was one that I think most people were kind of like, it was a bridge too far.
Good. Glad that died.
What else? Those are the hot ones that we were watching.
I think that's it. You know,
Yeah.
the last
right,
big
well-
hot one is who's, you know, whether we're going to have a new flag or not. That's the I know it sounds silly, but that is a big issue that is, you know, taking up a lot of time up here, and the House is gonna debate it. So it's gonna be a big battle.
Well, we're not worried about the flag. So we'll be in touch tomorrow, Casey. Let's get on SB
Okay.
271, see what we can do.
We'll get you that info by
Okay.
the end of the night, Casey.
All right. See
Thanks, you guys. See ya.
Nathan, did you have anything you wanted to add in this part of?
Yeah, I just wanted to add two extra bills that should be on your radar, and then I just wanted to comment a little bit on HB 406. So the other bill that's gained a lot of attention, I know Ronnie's been following it closely, is HB 291. That's regarding short-term rentals. That would basically create a pilot program that Moab hasn't been interested in. Originally, the idea was cities could use this pilot program to bring short-term rentals in that were illegal, regulate them, get taxes from them. But the catch for that was that you'd have to have 80% of your residential housing zones available for short-term rentals. They revised that at the last minute to drop it to 5% for normal towns and 20% for resort communities like Moab. Our concern with this bill, we've never had any interest in participating in the pilot program, but that it would become mandatory. That hasn't happened yet, but it looks like the bill is headed to interim study. Musselman in the hearing today asked that it be sent back to rules. He thinks it needs more work. So that may not even be a bill that we see this year. But if it does go to interim study, it's something we're going to want to track just to make sure if they come up with a voluntary program that it stays voluntary. I also wouldn't mind taking a stab at the current prohibition on using online advertisements solely as a basis for code enforcement for people that violate our short-term rentals. That was off the table this year, but who knows if there's an interim discussion, maybe we could make some traction there, because that's a huge impediment for our ability to currently enforce our ordinances as they are. The other one is SB 174. That's another land use bill. It will make a number of changes to the subdivision process. This is another one that has leadership support, was negotiated by the league. This one will almost certainly pass. I don't think it's going to be too problematic, but one change that it's going to require is it's going to prohibit city councils or planning commissions from issuing approval for final plats. So for instance, we have, I think, at least one or two of those on the agenda tonight under this bill. Those would need to be approved administratively rather than the city council. My comment with HB 406, my main concern with that bill, and I'm not alone among city attorneys who have this concern, is that in addition to what Casey and Dan mentioned, it also requires us every time the city does a development agreement to disclose every right that the developer is waiving by signing the agreement. And if we don't disclose all of those rights, the agreement will be void as applied to the right that we didn't disclose. And that's just a very difficult thing for us to do. And it creates a lot of uncertainty for the city that, typically when we do these development agreements, the developer gets the bargain that they want on the front end, such as the rezone or the annexation. And then my concern is that when we go to get what we want, they'll say, hey, you didn't list something. And so the agreement is unenforceable as opposed to X, Y, and Z. So we're still figuring out what that would look like and how to deal with that particular issue. But that in my opinion, is the biggest concern with HB 406.
I thought I heard Casey say that for development agreements where we reduce the zoning requirement. And I don't know.
Yeah, so that's the other
true,
piece of
'cause
that
most
bill.
of the times, if that's true, most of our DAs are up zones, not down zones.
Yeah, that's why I don't think that part of the bill is really going to impact you, because most of the time, at my firm, my partners and I that do development agreements, we thought this was kind of an odd change, because usually the development agreements are requested by the developer because they like to lock these things in so that their rights are set in stone and can't be changed by subsequent city councils or administrations. And this really kind of makes it harder, I think, for cities to want to do development agreements, But you're right. What it says technically is that we can't require a development agreement as a condition for developing land if our land use regulations establish all applicable standards for developing land. So if they want to do something that's already allowed under our zoning, we can't require a development agreement to do that. But that's not something Moab typically does anyway. And usually what happens is the developer that comes to us that wants the development agreement. And so my concern is it adds this disclosure requirement, which is tricky to do, and I think creates a potential poison pill for the city, but we'll need to figure out how to deal with that as we go through. I would say if we have any development agreements that we're considering now, this bill won't go into effect for a couple of months, so let's try to get those development agreements done before the bill goes into effect.
Okay, sounds good. Just so council knows too, and I'll bring this up again if I remember, just so you know, with Senate Bill 174, the 3 items on our agenda tonight, items 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6, under that bill, we would not be considering those in a city council meeting. You guys would not have to decide on those. So just as an example. And so, Nathan, where did he go? I heard today that the food tax bill was put on hold. I don't know. I don't know what that means. Does that mean, I know they were talking about putting it up for a vote.
That one had, the last that I had seen it had been tied to basically the defunding of public school systems. So we revoked our support for it because we just felt like it was not worth the loss of revenue to the public school systems for the
Right.
cut to the local property or the food sales tax.
So when they put it on hold, what does that mean?
I don't know what does that mean that it was just killed in committee or sent to interim study?
I don't know.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to kill a bill. So if it's killed if it doesn't pass out of committee or if it's held in committee, that usually means the bill is dead. Sometimes if you have a bill that has passed one house of the legislature and is waiting for passage in the other, what they'll do now is they will send, for instance, if you've got a bill that has passed the House, and Carly, I'm blanking on the number of that bill, but
101,
yeah,
HB 101.
101, has it passed the House?
Yes. It
So
was
it
in the
passed the
Senate
House, it's
today.
waiting passage in the Senate.
It was held in the Senate.
Yeah, so if it's held in the Senate, that might mean it's dead. That's probably a sign that it's dead. But what'll also happen is if you have a bill that's pending passage in the Senate, now that they're running out of time, what they'll do is they'll send those bills to Senate Rules Committee.
It's in Senate
then-
rules right now.
Yeah, so when it goes to Senate Rules, what they'll do now is the whips will work together and they'll prioritize these bills into 4 classes. Class A is must-pass bills, so that's going to be HB 406. Like that's going to be a bill that will go into A. B, which is we'd like to pass this bill. C is we don't really care about this bill one way or the other. And D is, these aren't bills that are moving. And so they'll package those together, and then the bills could pop out at any time between now and the end of the session.
Nathan, it looks like it was held in committee and returned to rules.
Yeah. Okay. So if it was held in committee and it didn't make it out of the committee, then it might be
right.
dead for the session.
It's dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bill that I'm talking about that'll be prioritized, that's if they've made it out of committee and they're waiting for the full Senate to vote on them.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Nathan on legislative issues? We've been working hard. Our team's been working hard. So, okay, thanks. We'll move on to special event sound monitoring efforts with Joe Lima. And just as a reminder, Joe came to us several months ago and offered to do kind of an unofficial sound monitoring of some of our louder events and put together some statistics for you guys to look at, some graphs. And so, Joe, I'm just going to turn the time over to you to let us know what you found.
I apologize. I didn't do a PowerPoint, so I'm kind of an old school make graphs sort of guy. So we did sound readings on several events in Moab. We did all of the summer concert series, the folk festival both days, and the Scots on the Rocks festival. So those are kind of main ones in town that have been on the radar with everybody. So I'm going to kind of set this up so you guys kind of know where we're going with it. The summer concert series and the Moab Folk Festival have low decibel, average, and peak decibel readings, as opposed to the Scots on the Rocks just has an average and a peak. And that is the reason why there's not a low decibel reading on the Scots on the Rocks Festival is because bagpipes are not a dynamic instrument. They are one volume all the time, so they're just a bagpipe. So you can't really change that. So we'll start on the Scots on the Rocks Festival. I also took readings from some concerned citizens, front yards as well, and then some supporting citizen as well to make it a fair, readings for everybody. Scots on the Rocks Festival opening ceremony had peak levels of 76 decibels. That's what I have here in my notes here, which is it's a good volume. I'm not going to tell you it's not. That's a pretty good one. So the bagpipers that were warming up just right here by this window in a reflective area, that's where the loudest part was of the festival. Was you had 20 people in a circle playing Amazing Grace with all the reflective rock and windows and everything, and they hit 82 decibels. We jumped there. So during the festival, Scots on the Rocks Festival, we had groups of bagpipes in two different fields that were competing, usually in groups of two. And they would hit about 68 decibels, each one individually. So the residence areas that I took readings from, one would be Michael Liss. He's just 2 houses up here from the library on this side of the street. He peaked at 43 decibels outside in his front yard. Donnie Kiffmeyer and Kathy Hunter across the street directly this way, 46 decibels for the Scots on the Rocks, and Kyle and Carrie Bailey hit 48 because they're a little bit closer to where the action was going on. There is an interesting note that I found is every time a car drives by, it increases 10 decibels every time. It's pretty consistent. So that's Scots on the Rocks Festival. I combined the summer concert series at Swanee Park together because that is a very controlled sound environment because we have I know that Cass had a sound engineer that was hired to do the concerts, very consistent equipment, use the same equipment every time. And he's also, the sound engineer is very aware of what the restrictions are that we're trying to keep under, which is 92 decibels, which is your peak. That festival, all of them were wonderful. Nice crowds there as well. Decibel readings for summer concert series were taken 10 feet back from the center stage, 75 feet back from the center stage, using a Will measuring tape and also using a GPS program for accuracy. So we tried to stay, according to my calculations, we're within 6 inches. It's pretty accurate. So center stage for the summer concert series, low decibel reading, 10 feet away from the center stage was 78 decibels. 87 decibels average and 92 decibel peak. And I want you guys to understand that the peak readings are not a constant. It's a peak. So peak meaning you could have 10 musicians hit a note at the same time, and it's going to peak. It's going to be a burst of sound, and then it's dynamic, and then it gets quieter. So that's not a constant. So that's truly not. If it was 92 decibels constant, you would have smaller crowds and people couldn't do the sound pressure, it'd be too loud for them. Carrying on with the summer concert series, center stage from 75 feet back, low decibel readings of 62, 67 average decibel readings, and 79 peak readings. Took readings from left and right stage, 10 feet back, 75 feet each way. Understand that the speakers are pointing out towards the crowd, so it dissipates, the sound does as you go further left and right, it gets quieter. It's very focused, straightforward is how it works. Those readings are pretty spot on the same, 58 decibels low reading, 62 decibels average, and 73 peak. Rear stage from the concert series as well was quieter because it's a covered stage. So the sound doesn't go through the sound curtain very well. So it's much quieter. It's about 43 decibels. It's pretty straightforward. Folk Festival, which I attended, wonderful festival as well. We did have some highs on that. And I can explain the reason why we had some higher decibel readings on the Folk Festival of our average. Our peak at a few times during the festival, especially on the last day with the last artists, hit up to 97 decibels, which is out of the range that you guys allow us to do. So reason being is that the hired sound engineer that did the festival was kind of pushed aside per se, because the artist that was playing wanted their sound engineer to run the sound. So all of a sudden there wasn't that control of it where it should have been. And Cass is aware of that. We've talked extensively about it. So it's just one of those things where you have to just tell the artist no. It's just how we're going to do it. So, and most artists I deal with the recording artists all the time with my business, and most everybody's just like, okay, we got you. So, Folk Festival, are hot. Let's go 10 feet back. And there's variables to this too, because we're dealing with different placement of the stage. So this festival is a little bit different because it's taken an angle from kind of corner from home plate to the corner of the field where the what do we call it, where the scoreboard is. So it was facing a different direction. As far as for residential hotspots, Michael Less was 48 decibels, Donnie Kiffmeyer was 49, and Kyle and Carrie Bailey was 57, because it was closer and it was also the angle of the speakers kind of landed in their front yard a little bit more. It does seem like that number, that 57 decibels, might be a little bit low, but we also have to consider the bodies absorb sound, cars reflect sound, so it didn't quite get over there as loud as it was, unless as it was when you were directly in front of it. Center stage 75 feet back, we had 64 decibels low, 69 average, and 72 decibels peak. And the rear of the stage was 45 decibels. Pretty simple readings, very accurate as far as for measurements and trying to keep it consistent and have it make sense for you guys. So I think there are definitely some things that can be addressed as far as for how to keep control of volumes and such. And I think everybody that's doing festivals needs to have that reminder of what the restrictions are and that there'll be people watching. Right. I think it's very important. So you guys have any questions at all?
Questions for Joe? Well, thanks, Joe. We've been anxiously awaiting.
Sorry, it took
your
me some time.
report. That's
to do
okay.
this,
I know
so.
you have to ski. It's a good ski season.
Yeah.
But really appreciate this data. I know it's unofficial per se, but it really is helpful for us so that we, if we have any complaints, we can look at this and, see what we can do to mitigate those.
Yeah, feel free to call me if you want me to go around.
Yeah,
again.
I guess I do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but just for those of us who don't necessarily record sound, just so we know, like, what kind of equipment do you use? And obviously it's the same at every event.
I was actually
so-
going to bring my
Oh, okay.
handheld decibel meter with
Yeah.
me. It's actually in my car. But I took them two different ways. So I have a handheld meter, and then I also have an app on my iPhone from Performance Audio up in Salt Lake,
Okay.
which is one of the larger sound reinforcement companies up in the valley. They have a wonderful app. It's very accurate. So I kind of doubled down on both the readings. It's kind of interesting, like with the our measurements with Scots on the Rocks when we did the when they had the parade march, when everybody came out, and that was like right in the middle of the field, and that I had two people on each side, and then I was doing my measurements as well to make sure that we were capturing all of that, like the peak of what it was.
Okay,
So
no, thanks. That's just cool.
that
It's
helped
nice
you
to
out.
know. And I figure some
And
people
like I said, I
listening.
mean, I could even provide you guys with model number and everything that I use. So that's fine. I've been using the same decibel meter for the last 10 years for doing different things. So I'm very cautious, as an example, like with the summer concert series, the very first one that they did, I had my grandkids with me, and I take earplugs for them. Take earplugs from me too. Because if I'm exposed to it, because I've been in this industry for so long, if I'm exposed to high sound pressure for too long, I can't hear my grandkids talk. So I lose that top end. And part of it's from being in the military as well.
I guess it did occur to me, I have one other question, and maybe more for the mayor and Carly, but what's the plan moving forward? Are we planning to do this over the, in the next year, and like, how do we choose what events we're recording and what ones we aren't? Just
We can, if you want to.
Yeah, we haven't really gone beyond this.
Mhm.
Actually, we wanted to kind of see what the data was and see what we needed to do, but we can have further conversation, see what we need to do.
I think what you have done as far as for as a city council with what you've required and asked for and asked for changing and working with the event people, I think just from what I've seen going to these different events, I think everybody adhered to your requests, and that made a difference.
Mhm.
It really did. So thanks for working with all the event people, and hopefully everybody will continue to move forward and play by the rules and keep these great events. I mean, gosh, music in Moab's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
So, all right, guys, thank you. Appreciate it.
Joe, thanks so much for
Yep.
taking the time and volunteering to do this. It's been very beneficial, good information for us to have. And Annie, I'm sure you'll take this to heart and work with event coordinators with the information that you have.
Yeah, that's probably the most immediate value right
Right.
now is just knowing how to coordinate with applications as they come in and knowing what works and what doesn't
Right,
with some data behind it. So.
great. All right, that does it for our presentations. We have no department head updates. This is just on here for placeholder in case something comes up that we have an opportunity to bring a department head in, but we have nothing tonight. We do have our consent agenda. There's actually only 2 items we're going to be voting on. Item 5.1 was voted on at our last meeting and was overlooked, so we will not be voting on that. So 5.1 is not up for consideration under consent. We will be voting on 5.2 fiscal year 23 complete financials. And we will be voting on the approval of the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $157,108.43. Item number 5.3, there was some sort of glitch. I don't know what happened. So I'm going to ask at this point for a motion to pull item 5.3 and to table it until our meeting on 3/14.
that's our minutes.
Yes.
This, we're guessing what happened. The agenda was so huge because of the plat materials. It seems that the minutes were uploaded incomplete. There are like parts of them missing, so you don't have complete minutes. You can just table it to next time.
Right.
We're gonna try to figure out a way.
They were
Yeah,
wonky.
it's weird. So just the ones and zeros got lost in the
There's a
in the
little
ether.
glitch.
Yeah.
So if I could have a motion to pull item 5.3, the approval of February 14th minutes to table until the next meeting on March 14th.
I will move to table the approval of the February 14th minutes until March 14th.
Great, thanks, Tawny. Second? Second by Luke. Any further discussion on that item? All right, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of tabling the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, Next would be a motion to approve item 5.1, the financials of Q2, and 5.4, the approval of the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of 157,100.43 cents.
So moved.
Motion by Kaylin,
I'll second.
seconded by Tawny to approve the consent agenda items 5.2 and 5.4. Any discussion? Nope. Call for the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next on our general business is the consideration and approval of Grand County Emergency Operation Plan. We have Whitney Coonrod. Hopefully is going to be on the call. Oh, okay. All right. Right. So hopefully Whitney, who's from the Utah Division of Emergency Management, who's been working with Cora in the county and the city on our emergency operation plan, will be able to join us if you have any questions for her. Otherwise, Cora is going to talk to us about the emergency operation plan. And just so everybody knows, there has been questions that came up as to why the EMS in the police department and others weren't involved in the development of this plan. And I think that's a process Cora will address tonight for you guys. But, you know, my understanding is that we needed to get a plan in place in order to become in compliance. It also allows us to get some funding, and that this document is a fluid document. It's a working document. And I think Cora has plans to pull stakeholders together, and then we can work through it and make it a better document that fits our community and our city.
Yeah.
So Corey, why don't you come up, and Carly, go ahead.
So if you recall, after the floods in August, we were going to apply for some relief money. And I believe it was FEMA or DHS. I asked us to provide the copy of our adopted emergency plan. We did not have an emergency plan. We had not adopted the counties. We tried to adopt it after, and they said it doesn't really matter if it's after, it has to be before. We were able to kind of find a workaround and go through the county, so it was okay. But what we did do, as I believe, just to be sure, in case of the next emergency, we adopted the county's past plan. They have now adopted a new one. So the plan we adopted is no longer relevant. You know, we have one that doesn't really necessarily match the counties anymore. And while we are allowed to, by state statute, to either create our own plan or adopt the county's plan, we've adopted the county's plan, but it doesn't really exist. So that's why we need to update this one, just so we're on kind of the same page. We can't have competing plans. That would be very difficult to coordinate during an emergency. And two, to make sure that we do qualify for these funds. And I appreciate the mayor kind of mentioning I see it as sort of a step one to get us all coordinated. And we are also being asked to be involved in the development of the hazard mitigation plan, which is a separate planning effort. But Cora can speak more to that.
And I believe council made some suggested changes that I think Cora incorporated and yeah, and I don't think that it needs to go back to the county, because it is the county emergencies operations plan, but this is our plan for us. So changes we made will be the city's changes.
Or they can
Am
be
I right?
reflected in the county plan.
They're reflected in the county.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I can speak more to that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cora.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, of course.
Who is the city's emergency manager?
I believe it is me. We're chasing that down to make sure that's actually been assigned.
In the
Um,
past, unless it changed, that's what David and Joel had told us.
I think
Yeah.
it is. That is my recollection. Although when I went to go to confirm, I did not know where to look. So we're trying to make sure that is actually the case. We also thought we had an emergency management plan, 6 months ago. So no, there's no.
I'm sure Carly will work very closely with Cora if there's an
Yes.
emergency.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, there's one line in here that just made me chuckle.
Oh, yeah.
While most secondary roads are paved, there are still several unpaved public roads. in the
And you would know.
There are, I do. There are 5,100 miles of road approximately in this county.
Can't believe that. You
It's on the county website. That includes highways, state highways, reservations, city streets, and private roads. The county road department maintains 1,400 miles of road. Only 180 of those miles are paved and 150 are gravelled. The rest are natural materials, which means dirt.
Thank you.
I just had to laugh when I read that.
That's good. That's very good.
Did I give you the thing? Just before I came here, a car passed in front of my house with the boom box. It was so loud, it knocked the picture off the wall.
Oh, no.
It was all right. It was in the- But down fast, it was loud.
That is loud. All right, Cora,
Okay,
without going into a lot of detail, just cover some of the areas that are important for us to be aware of.
certainly I'll go into the commonly asked questions or frequently asked questions. So as you mentioned, this is necessary as part of House Bill 96, as on the screen. The city has to have a plan. It is much more cost effective for the city to adopt our plan versus creating your own. Moving forward, so this plan will be formally updated every 5 years. However, I will be following the Comprehensive Preparedness Guide, or CPG 101, and the plan will be updated after a major incident, change in operational resources, change in elected officials, major exercises, etc. So quite a bit, and as needed. This is a basic plan. It does not include the emergency support functions or support the annexes. I know there's, as was mentioned earlier, we have a task force meeting coming up, and at that time I will be scheduling with the individual stakeholders to really delve into those emergency support functions. Essentially, the basic plan is like this much, and altogether it creates a document that's about this big printed out. So there's quite a bit to go through to get that all developed. Does that,
Is that it?
yeah.
Okay. Hey, questions, council, for Cora. And I don't know, did Whitney jump on? Did she come back? All right, just so you know, if you need, Whitney's kind of here just in case, but whoever you prefer to direct your questions to. Questions? Jason, go ahead.
So what changes were made according to?
So this plan was last updated in 2012, and that's the same with those annexes and supporting annexes and emergency support functions.
Okay.
And Kaylin had amendments that were related to just sort of like, we don't have a city fire department, we just use the Valley Fire Department. It was more like making sure roles and responsibilities were cleaned up to actually reflect our administrative structure.
Okay. When I read this, I just kind of felt that it was very county oriented, which is, I guess, fine on a lot of things, but I kind of had issue in reading over it that, like, the policymaker, the policy part things, there wasn't any city representative on that. It was the sheriff's office, the county attorney, and things like that. And we don't even have a seat at the table to discuss policies that are going on. And so my concern with that is if there was an incident that happened, that the way this is written right now, there's no say from the city in that, right? Is that kind of, I know that, like, if there's, like, we're not even invited to be at the EOC, if there's something going on where there's something. And so, the way that, and then,
I'm sorry, was that in the past?
it was in the packet. It was in this document that you sent us, on, I don't know, that it talks about policymakers, and things like that in it. And it details who the policymakers are, and they're all county representatives. And so there's not even anyone from the fire district on there. There's no one from the EMS on there. And so I as I was reading this, I was just kind of like, man, this doesn't have like all the players, and that could be affected by this if there was things going on, such as the floods, and so, and then I called up the EMS director today and I said, hey, you read this? And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen this. And I think that caused some emails that went around, this afternoon. But the way that that policy or document was written, there was nothing in there. No one's had input in on it. the fire, and I don't know if the fire department, I didn't talk to TJ today, but from my understanding is that they didn't have any input in on it either and stuff. So so anyway, I just kind of had some concerns with who everybody is involved with this, and feel like you're putting the cart before the horse, you know, in this, like, hey, let's create this document and then we'll go back and revise it later, you know, which to me seems kind of haphazard.
Right now, it's very crucial that the city has an updated emergency operations plan in place because of House Bill 96. Obviously, there needs to be more coordination. And that's something that I'm working on.
Right.
To get all those players at the table. And when we have an emergency operations center activated, there are players at the table.
And I appreciate you bringing this together and doing it, you know, but it's basically being presented as the county's emergency program, you know.
Yep.
And we're asking to jump on the shirt tails of it and ride along, which up until yesterday, you know, has the police chief seen it? Has he signed off on it? You know, and I'd be very reluctant to pass something that the guy that's in charge of pulling this off hasn't even seen.
So the problem is this is the adopted county plan. Like right now, that is what is in place. So we might not adopt it. It's still what's going to be implemented during an emergency. And we just will miss out on funding opportunities if we don't have it. So do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it is a reality that this is the adopted plan. I think it's not perfect. It sounds like Whitney and the county are willing to maybe amend it, but we need to have like something in place in case there's an emergency. It's not a placeholder, it actually is what would be implemented, but otherwise we just get kind of shut out in the cold when it comes to relief.
So essentially, it is the county's plan.
Yeah.
And if we don't adopt it, then it's, you know, it's still going to be the law of the land in terms of emergency operations. But if there's an emergency in Moab, like the flood, we would not be eligible for funding because we don't have this plan.
It sounds like Whitney is on. Does she have a raised hand? Oh, okay.
Okay, Whitney.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to this. I just wanted to speak to what I believe it's Carly. It's hard to see on this virtual environment. But
you can see my foot.
Yes, I believe that it was her that was saying that yes, it does preclude Moab City from being able to get any funding if they don't have an adopted EOP. We understand, Cora and I have gone over this. It is an older EOP. It has not been revised in many years. She is fully aware that, you know, she's going to make huge changes to this, but it does preclude you from being able to get funding for the flood. That's not why we got denied this time for PA funding, but it would preclude you in the future from not being able to get that funding. So yes, there are a lot of things that are different than what you would like to see. The ESFs, I'm not sure the council member's name, but you said about fire and EMS, and all of those things are ESF functions that we definitely need to make revisions to as far as this plan. But it's already things that are being done. The EOP essentially is just like an umbrella for things that have already been done. It's pretty vague if you get right into the nuts and like looking at it. It doesn't say, you know, like this person will call this person. It just has an overwhelm or an umbrella function of what, you know, EMS would do or fire would do. It doesn't say they will do this or they will do that, you know, so that it holds it to that liability. But it's just an umbrella for right now. I believe that there will be some big changes made that will be more encompassing and more favorable to the city-county relationship in the future.
Any questions for Whitney or Cora? Yes, Luke.
Yeah, I guess potentially a question for Cora and for Carly as well. So right now, kind of this is a cover our own butts like approach to make sure that in case we have like an emergency like this weekend or something, we can apply for federal funding. But we as council, after if we were to pass this, still have like the opportunity to either like direct staff to create like a Moab specific one or to get in touch with the county to make sure that Moab specific services are included in the plan. correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it's to make sure that you're protected and the city is protected, yes.
And we
Ron?
can do that. And we are with like the hazard mitigation plan and other things. So yeah, I just see this as like, it's just a big elephant and like, this is the first bite. So, you know, after we bite through this, we'll get to the other thing.
Ronnie.
So just to wrap that all up, I was going to thank Jason and Kaylin for the questions they asked in our shared document. And Cora, I totally understand you've stepped into this job and, you know, over the past year or two with different things happening in town, believe me, many of us have asked and we're probably documented asking, oh, where's this plan we're supposedly have, right? So thanks for digging that out of a closet and trying to revive and improve it because I understand and I totally get this is a county plan and, you know, we have to decide, are we going to write our own, or are we going to hop on board with you guys? So I think all we need, Mayor and Carly, is maybe a little bit of reassurance is should our motion, if we make it, be what's in, that is suggested in our packet, or would it be appropriate to add, that we would like within a certain amount of time to either direct one of us on council to be like a point person to maybe, you know, work on and because I think the county has done that, maybe with
Yes.
Evan, yeah. So that, you know, we can go over and the rest of us when we read it or review can then send feedback to that person and not to put, you know, too much work on any one person's plate. So I'm not sure if that's the best setup, but that's one scenario we could take. But I think it would make some people feel better, myself included, if we knew we're committing over the next month, 3 months, I don't know what it is, to go over this thing with a fine tooth comb and see, since it was a county plan and the city now wants to jump on board, what do we have to insert? And if we disagree for some reason about the stuff we want to insert, how are we going to handle that? So that was my only feeling about it. So I will kind of rely on you guys, on Whitney, on what the best structure is. You know, should we choose one of us as a point person? Should we, but, you know, and can we have in our motion that we would like to,
I think,
you know, review this
I-
again in a few months after some edits?
Can I
I
make
would
a suggestion?
yeah, go ahead, Cora, please.
We do have a local emergency planning committee and currently we have a commission member on that. The meetings are quarterly. That might be a good start and that person could be also serve as the point person for this document and many others.
For a commissioner or a city council member?
So there's a commission member that's currently
On the committee.
the point person for the local emergency planning committee. If a council person from the city.
I guess if I would want to appoint someone, it would be Jared Garcia or someone from the police department who would be participating as, not Jared, no?
Well, he will already be.
Oh, he'll already be on there. Oh, I see. I would like, just get one. It's kind of.
So Cora, I mean, just to address Ronnie's question, how long do you think it's gonna, because, you know, clearly our plan is to modify this document so that it fits in with what the city, what the city wants and what the city needs. How long is that process gonna take?
It's really just a matter of getting everyone at the table
Okay,
and scheduling that.
Council member can be part of it.
yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I don't know, Jason. I mean, obviously it's a lot of it's a lot of work. So I'm not saying you should be the person, but I'm trying to think hard. I'm not necessarily saying that, but given the concerns though that you raise and the knowledge that we have that yes, we need to make sure EMS and the fire department, et cetera, have reviewed this and we're filling, you know, in my mind, we're doing triage, right? We're filling blatant holes first, and then we know it's a living document and we're improving it over time. So does that sound like something that would work, or do you have a better suggestion?
I have a better suggestion.
Okay, yeah.
I think our staff can handle it. And I think, I mean, frankly, question how thoroughly the county commission vetted it. I mean, the things that I identified were pretty obvious to anyone who's like familiar with these agencies.
I kind of wonder if they were in the same situation where they realized, I mean, I haven't gone back and listened to their meeting, but where they realized, oh, okay, this thing hasn't been looked at in a long time and better do that, or, you know, better at least put a
But-
new
but-
date on it. I don't know.
But to go back to Jason's
Yeah.
concerns.
Yeah.
I also sort of put this in the county commission's
Yeah.
ballpark that is it that hard to just let the executive directors of the different special service districts that are providing the emergency response, letting them know this is happening and what the process is going to be, as opposed to finding out via the city.
Yeah, the one, and I guess it wouldn't be an elected official, but like a city representative that I think makes sense to potentially have on there would be like the communications director. In terms of like having the agencies like basically outline specifically like what they're going to do in response to those events, but we need to figure out how to communicate to the community when those events are ongoing. And so I think having a person who has that type of access and that perspective would be valuable in the conversation.
Could I just clarify what your need is? Are you just looking for a point person for coordination?
I think potentially to attend those quarterly meetings, that kind of represents the city on a broader level and not at an individual agency level. Like Chief Garcia would be there for like the police and all of that. And so, yeah, somebody that
He's already invited.
Yeah. And we assume that he would be there, but just kind of understanding that in those times of emergency, I think a lot of the on-site, like police officers and like firefighters, EMS and everything are going to be directly addressing the emergency.
Right.
But there's also a lot of value in communicating that to the community, like having ongoing updates to the community, just so that, there's somebody kind of overlooking.
Like a public information officer?
Yeah.
So, Lex and I are actually working on that and developing a joint PIO group. We have some stuff in the works, but I don't know, speak totally for us. Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually worse. We're all clearly it's an emergency that I'm going to be deeply involved in. That's why us creating the group is so important for that part.
Okay.
Move all the messages that are going on. And so we're working with several things out and how really important that
Yeah, and in addition to the LAPC meetings locally, we have the task force meetings that happen every month with local stakeholders. So there's communication happening.
So I'd like to suggest that Carly be the representative because she oversees,
I guess I'm
Lisa
responsible
and
for it.
yeah, I think that she'd probably be the best person. And of course, you guys are welcome to attend those meetings if you're interested. I would
I'm
think.
curious.
Yeah.
Can they attend?
Unless Jason, you really.
I don't know that I am like. I mean, this is something that like we've been dealing with for years, a long time, and so to me, it's kind of frustrating that I appreciate you coming to us with this document because it's more than we had 6 months ago that we even knew that we had this. So I appreciate that, and we've been asking for it for a long time. I guess my concern with it is that as I read through this document, Moab City is not represented much in it, and so it's like, hey, you guys approve this plan, this emergency plan, and we'll put you guys in later.
Well, that's exactly.
And that's what you guys are, that's what we're being asked to do is like, hey, you guys approve this, we're going to represent you with this plan because it checks a box on the state statute, and then we'll put you in later, and so I guess I'm fine adopting this if we have a timeline, that we're going to say, hey, we're going to, in the next 3 months or whatever it is, we're going to go through this item by item, and we're going to make sure that, the Moab City Police Department is represented, that the Moab City, that we're represented for our citizens, that if there's things in here that pertain to us, that we, that we're represented.
Yep.
Like Carly, is that something you would just do on your own? Like, one of my questions was, if we had legal review of this, have our attorneys looked at
Yep.
it? But yeah, so is that something you would probably be working on? And then maybe there's like a Google Doc where we can let you know if there's certain parts that we would like,
I think really step one, in interest of time, here's really
Yeah.
the problem, right? We need to get this adopted quickly, and I think the county needed to as well. And what we are also engaging on in is this like larger discussion about emergency management and how we coordinate better, which takes time. So I think that, we're all kind of in this tough position where we need to get something in place, something workable, and that will pass muster for our statutory obligations. And I do think there's been a renewed commitment from the county when it comes to outreach. As soon as basically she was hired, Cora was reaching out to me. The police department and public works and public utilities have been engaged on these projects. I do think it's happening. I'm happy to attend these quarterly meetings. If it's quarterly, I think I can fit it into my schedule. That was my only reason to maybe not pipe up immediately, but maybe it probably is manageable, especially with other staff with much more technical expertise when it comes to emergency response, like the police department, engaging in the task forces and those like different issues. So I have a renewed sense of confidence in the collaboration that maybe I didn't feel, just a few months ago. I'm optimistic that it can work.
How
But
about
like
if we
in
ask,
terms of the concept of a timeline,
Yeah, no, I
when
was
we
just-
might be able to look at it
I
again
was
and
just
see the
gonna
city
say-
written in.
let's, I would like to suggest we make a motion and put a time, 6-month time frame on it. And Cora, I know that, Carly's like, I don't know if we can do it. 6
I'll
months.
do it.
But I think we should do that, because I agree. I think it's important for us to not let this slide, get the plan in place, but then make sure the city is well represented in the document. And, Cora needs to get the stakeholders together so we can ask for a report back in 6 months to let us know. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but since this is all supposed to be kind of like a living document and everything, I think it might make sense to just like request either like an annual or a biannual update so that it gets in front of like council's eyes at least once a year.
Sure.
And then that way we can make sure it's updated and everything is in there. I do have a lot of confidence in Cora. I was one of the people that hired her at Seek Haven and I'm familiar with her background in emergency management and responding to emergency incidents. And it sounds like when she was saying that if you really put everything together, print it out, this is a document that is this big. So, and there's a lot of people that are getting involved in this, and wrangling people together isn't always a timely process, but that way we have, even if it's not completed in 6 months or whatever, we see all of the updates that have happened and we continue to see the updates in an ongoing manner.
Okay. How about a motion? Lou?
Thank you.
I move to adopt the actual motion on.
Yeah, here.
I think the doc is good.
Oh, yeah, I move to approve the Grand County Emergency Operations Plan with the addition of a request to have a biannual report on the update and status of the plan.
All right, motion made by Luke. Second.
Can I ask, to
Yeah.
still have a 6-month,
Yeah.
Yes.
what wording?
That's what I'm just trying to
Like
think.
a check.
A 6-month something.
Biennial.
That's
That
what
means
biannual means.
Well,
Well,
I think-
a 6-month working group to,
yeah, maybe it's a workshop or at least an agenda item in 6 months so we can see a revised copy where we can see elements of the city,
Yeah.
injected, I guess, or.
Wasn't that your motion? Liz?
Yeah, my
Oh.
biannual is twice a year, so like basically
Oh.
every
I
6
thought
months.
Sorry.
I thought it was just a
Yes,
review.
those of us who get confused.
Yeah, and so it would be like a review where it gets presented to council and they have the opportunity to make comments on it. Like ultimately, I think at any point, if council is unhappy with it, they can make a motion like, I want to pull us out of this and I would like us to go in our own direction or whatever. But this way we make sure that it gets in front of council's eyes. And I think it'd be helpful for me to know like what the plan is, particularly as it is a living document and is going to be changing. Like technology is going to continue to change, and I'm sure it's going to amend the way in which emergency responds to certain situations. So yeah, I think just kind of having that consistent review where it gets back on our radar, because I think we have so much going on that it's easy to kind of forget about it, but this forces us to look at it twice a year.
How about including in the motion that request a biannual report and status update of the plan that shows the inclusion of Moab City representation?
Yeah, okay, I'll
that-
second that, yeah.
Okay, so wait a minute.
I will add
Oh.
what the mayor just stated.
Pardon for overstepping, now I'll
All right,
second.
so let me just repeat the motion by Luke to approve the Grand County Emergency Operation Plan that request a biannual report of the status and update of that plan that includes Moab City representation. So in 6 months, so that's the motion.
Yeah.
And so in 6 months, Carly, put it on your particular list.
Just did it.
She'll come back to us and let us know where we're at. And if anything comes up in between that time, you'll also let us know. So that's the motion. Seconded by you,
Oh,
Ronnie?
I guess should we add to the motion with the addition
Those comments.
of Kaylin's comments and the addition of Carly as a representative for the quarterly?
That doesn't all have to be in the motion.
Okay, cool.
I think we should just approve the plan and do the request separate. I don't think all that other stuff needs to be in. the
I'm
motion.
happy to have whoever wants to be involved.
All right, so we've got a motion on the table to approve the Grand County Emergency Operations Plan that includes a biannual report of the status and the update of the plan that includes Moab City representation
And Kaylin's comments.
and Kalen's amendments, but I think
Yeah, those are already been
They're
incorporated,
already-
so
yes,
never mind.
they're already there.
Yes, what the mayor just
Doug,
said.
did you get that? All right, so that's the motion. That's, we don't include, Kalen's amendments were already included. Ronnie?
Okay, I guess I'll still second. After all that,
all
I
right.
think, yeah.
All right, we have a motion made by Luke, seconded by Ronnie. Any discussion, Luke?
No.
Ronnie? Jason?
I'm happy to help.
Okay, great. Kalen or Tawny? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-1. Well, that was lively, Cora.
Yeah.
That's good. It was a good discussion. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cora.
No, 5.
Yeah, it was 5-0, Doug. It's unanimous. All right, next up, consideration of ordinance 2023-02, an ordinance amending Moab's municipal code 3.50.120 trash and recycling rates. Ben is going to present this one. As we all know, Solid Waste District presented at our last meeting and requested a rate increase. This motion was tabled until this meeting, so staff could put together a recommendation for you all to consider. And so, Ben?
Happy to take it from here. Thank you, Mayor. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is maybe going back, taking a larger step back and not talking specifically about these rates quite yet. If I can get the slide to advance. Perfect. I wanted to talk briefly about franchise agreements. And this has an end, it has a meaning. Franchise agreements are negotiated contracts with service providers. As we know, the purpose of a city is to provide services and to provide for the health, safety, and well-being of its community. So part of that major role is arranging for these franchise agreements. The major agreements that we have in place, at least that I'm aware of, are Dominion Rocky Mountain Power. So Dominion for natural gas service, Rocky Mountain Power for electric services, Emory Telecom is cable service, and Frontier for internet. A lot of times these franchise agreements allow for work within the city's right of way. They require significant investment from the franchisee. In the case of like Rocky Mountain Power, they have a massive network of infrastructure that is operating within the city's right of way. These are long-term agreements. Typically, in the case of like natural gas and Rocky Mountain Power, these agreements are 25 plus years. On an interesting side note, many of these agreements are up for renewal in the next 2 years, so something to look forward to. Solid waste and recycling hauling franchise agreements are typically in the 5 to 10 year range. These are, I think that's enough about franchise agreements. I did want to mention, the reason that I mentioned this is because it's important to understand the relationship between the city and the special service district. Kaylin, you may have to correct me on the name here, but I believe the legal name is Special Service District Number 1.
Solid waste.
Oh, there is solid waste.
Solid waste special service district number 1.
Great. I think for the duration of this meeting, I'll probably refer to it as the DBA, which is is kind of been adopted as Canyonland Solid Waste Authority, who is currently the franchisee for solid waste and recycling hauling services. The interesting thing that I find with this contract is this condition for a special rate review. So it's a 5-year contract. And what I have seen in such franchise agreements historically has been that they insulate themselves from unanticipated economic needs through things like a fuel surcharge. Basically, if fuel costs increase, then there's an additional surcharge because of those unanticipated costs. And other operational costs are kind of just absorbed in day-to-day operations. In this case, what we have is this condition where if one of 2 conditions are met, landfill tipping fees and operational costs exceed certain thresholds, then they're eligible for a rate review. The reason that I find this interesting is because it's, I would say, atypical for these private haulers to essentially open up their books. We kind of get we can dig as deep as we need to inside of this private, what typically is a private business, and say, is this rate review justified? And that, I think that's important to understand, that after the assumption of the franchisee contract by a government entity, we're now essentially just reviewing documents that are public anyway. So with that in mind, I think it's important that we now talk about the specific request that was made by Canyonland Solid Waste Authority. And the next item here is the fiscal cliff. So this is related to the financial condition of the district. And I've kind of done I haven't taken as much time as maybe I would have liked to. I looked at it at a single point in time, whereas the more valuable approach is kind of a broader change over time perspective. And what I found is, I think that probably the most critical metric to understand is as of their fiscal year end, there were 50 days of operating cash on hand. Basically what you do is you take your total operating expenses for the year and divide it by 365 to get how many days of cash that is. That includes your debt service, interest and principal payments. And in the case of, so then the question becomes, is that sufficient for an entity for the next year and a half? And I will say that our enterprise funds operate ideally under a condition of about 180 days. And these utility services are very capital intensive. And I will say with landfill management specifically, it takes a single event to close down a landfill and cause a massive catastrophe that has a huge cash outlay. I would say that when the Solid Waste Authority conducts a rate study, they will target somewhere between 180 days and 365 days cash on hand at any given time. So for that, I also think it's important to understand that this concept of a fiscal cliff is important to kind of get a grasp around the financial condition of the district. But also it's important to understand that it doesn't require an immediate cash urgency in order to trigger this. That's not the trigger for a special rate review. But I think it's important to understand that context.
Yeah, in other words, they don't have to be in a financial crisis to ask for the rate review, and we might be obligated to give it regardless of, even if they're not teetering on collapse. Yeah, just for that.
That said, I'm confident that they can make their next payroll. So
anybody's worried, right?
Yeah, didn't want to cause too much concern there. One of the valid concerns, especially as this helps provide context for how much people around the state and other similar areas are paying for solid waste hauling services. How I arrived at the sample pool, I think that's important to understand. These cities in light blue were provided by LJ. Thank you very much. And in dark blue were other cities that I pulled, other communities throughout the state of similar size and sometimes nature. So we have rural communities, we have some more urban communities. And just to kind of give a sample size, one thing that I did find is that there are a number of cities in the state that haul their own waste. And it's kind of a mix. It's not necessarily that they're providing it at a lower cost. So that's not always true. Sometimes the private sector can provide it cheaper. So that's important to know. But the essence of what we wanted to understand here are those two orange lines at $18. And this is this is for the essential service of 95 gallons per week. That's what I view as the baseline service. That's what the majority of users are going to be doing. 95, the larger cart picked up every week. And so the proposal from the district is that that rate increases from $18 per month to $20 per month. So there we go. I think there was one anomaly, one outlier community in Colorado that I removed just so that it wouldn't distort the chart. It was like $60 per month. So I don't know what they have done, but they've gotten themselves into some garbage.
Such a bunch of unsters tonight.
What a joke. It's like you're fired for that.
Okay, so we now come to the staff recommendation as it relates to rates. What we as staff are recommending is that the council adopt the rates as proposed by the district. And I wanted to provide some context to that. So one concern, so how these rates were created is not maybe how we would otherwise approach this. As has been identified, we have two kind of the high and the low level of service that I already referenced 95 gallon every week. The low level of service, the minimum level of service is 65 gallons every other week. And the current charge for those are $12 and $18 respectively. And both are being proposed to be increased by $2 per month. So this is basically, it's not a percentage increase. And there may be reason to do this in the case of if you're providing a service where you have a lot of cash payers, just out of pure convenience. I would say generally that doesn't apply for this service that we're providing, or that the district is providing. And so what I found is that about the average rate across all levels of services, there are quite a few, is about 14%. And so the $12 service level is increasing more than 14%. The $18 service level is increasing by less than 14%. And what this amounts to is if we were to adopt like a 14% proposed increase, which again, we don't really have the latitude to do. I think the district would be open to it if we suggested, but per the term of the contract, it says that they are outlining the request, and then the city is either adopting or modifying that request. So what this amounts to—
Adopting in whole or in parts.
Thank you.
It's important.
Okay, so 32 cents per month overage, and this amounts to, over the duration of the franchise agreement with the solid waste district, at the lowest level of service, they're paying $5 more over the next 18 months. And so from staff's opinion, this doesn't meet a materiality threshold of concern. That said, I think it's also important to note that the lowest level of service doesn't necessarily translate to being like the underserved population. Many households require 95 gallon every week, regardless of income level. So, you know, we talk about equity, but it's not necessarily just really directly related to your size of your can. This isn't, some people don't, you don't always have the option of which size and frequency of service to choose. So, but also the total number of residents impacted by that 65 gallon every other week is 114. So we have 114 users taking advantage that will be impacted.
What is that out of total?
2,200 households.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly. Okay. That said, the reason that there are a number of reasons that we are recommending moving forward with these rates as presented, primarily with the renewal of the franchise agreement coming up in about 1.5 years, we have the district has the opportunity to be more thorough with the rate study. And what I mean by that is that it should be preceded by a capital improvements plan, or could be preceded by a capital improvements plan that will enhance essentially take a more holistic approach to rate setting and the negotiation of this franchise agreement. So by allowing that additional time, it won't be, we feel like it won't be quite as rushed. The district is also committed to not requesting an additional increase until that time of that renewal. And so for that reason, it's likely that these rates as proposed are the lowest cost option for Moab City and business, Moab residents and businesses. Should we wait for a rate study? It's highly likely that this could be more. And I think it is important to understand the role of the city with this franchise agreement. It really is the duty of the city council and the city to provide to negotiate the best level of service, but also at the lowest cost. And so for that reason, staff's recommendation again is to adopt the rates as presented by the district 2 weeks ago.
Questions, Kaylin, I'm gonna call on you since you're on the board. Do you have any questions or comments?
That was a great presentation. Thank you. You've really summarized it well, I believe.
Thank you.
Questions for Kaylin?
For Kaylin?
Kaylin, I mean, sorry. Ben, questions, you can ask Kaylin a question if you'd like, but Ben made the presentation, so we'll start with Ben.
I'll ask the devil's advocate question because I think it should be asked. So I totally understand your points about definitions of equity and rates and less frequent service and smaller counts. However, I will repeat what I said before is that for some time now, we've supposedly had sustainability goals of reducing waste production and what's the word I'm trying to think of? Crap, I'm not going to be able to think of it. Yes, thank you. And I kind of feel like, especially if you have 114 people, throw a dog a bone and offer some kind of reward to people who are producing less waste. But that's the only thing that makes it difficult for me is to not be consistent in asking for that now, because I feel like when we have a rate study, I do want to see that looked at in a rate study of how we can encourage waste diversion and reward people who are producing less. And so I feel it would be, my problem is it feels inconsistent to say, okay, we'll raise everybody's rates across the board this time, but then later try and make it match a little bit closer. Does that make any sense? And like I said, kind of devil's advocate question, but yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'll let someone else ask a question. And honestly, I'm sorry because I think I just asked Kaylin a question. You guys look so similar. Sorry, Ben. The blue shirt.
I think we went through this a lot, trying exactly thinking along your lines, Ronnie. We're constrained by one, like the contract. So we can deny in whole or in part, we can't unreasonably withhold a rate increase. So we're like balancing our obligations under the contract under defensibility, which are, we don't usually have like the contract that we're kind of negotiating while we're talking about rates. I think the conclusion, I don't mean to speak for you, Ben, but this was your, I think, better judgment, because you're the one making the judgment on the financials, that the cost of service for everyone is at least $2, that increase. It's probably true that everyone owes at least $2 when it comes to eventually the rate study being produced. So I don't think we're asking anyone to pay for more than they are already impacting their cost of service. Does that make sense? It's sort of, I did not say that very articulately. So, but everyone, I imagine everyone's rates are going to go up by $2. And everyone is having that kind of impact on the system every other week and every week. So we found it was consistent when it comes to their impact to the system.
So I guess my next question is, when one does a rate study, is that something one can look at?
Yes, I think
more carefully Yes.
hmm
So it's more data driven and.
Yeah, more holistic. It's all the services,
Because otherwise I feel like the city, and it's not the only way, obviously, that the city should be trying to divert waste, but it's one component that we just don't seem to be getting to. So I kind of feel like we either gotta walk the talk or just take that language out of our plans, because what, if anything, are we really doing? Okay, thanks.
And when can people switch if they feel like they aren't producing 95 gallons of trash every week? When can they switch to that smaller can or the less frequent?
So the problem is some people don't even fill a 65-gallon can every other week. So, I mean, I think it was one of the discussions we had with the last contract. Can we even get smaller cans? And at the time, those were the, two choices we could assess, but that might be something else when the franchise agreement is rewritten to look at.
This is when I wait for Marcy's text to come through because I
Yeah,
was
she
just
will,
listening.
because there is an answer and it's changed a couple times and there's a difference between
Is
or
it
maybe-
October or something?
I
Yeah,
Twice a
there's
year?
an enrollment period.
And like September, October, somewhere.
Yeah.
But is it specific to, it is for reduction too? Okay, there was. Anyway, yeah.
Any other questions? I'll ask for a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-02 and ordinance amending Moab Municipal Code 3.50.120 trash and recycling rates.
I'll second.
Right, motion made by Tani, seconded by Luke. Any discussion, Tani?
Nope, I've heard enough about garbage.
Luke?
No.
Anybody else? All in favor of the motion? Ronnie?
I guess I have something else, only because I think we all got an email, in our last meeting, we talked about the collective burden of rate increase, because we were talking about this and stormwater on residents, especially ones of either limited income or because not everybody in town, necessarily gets a COLA or a wage increase every year. And then we add to that inflation and we add to that all the other rates and the property tax going up. So I think we all got a letter from a resident kind of spelling out a lot of that and the increases they've seen over time and how that's so much harder to digest over time. So obviously, we kind of understand that if we want to keep having trash service, the district can't keep eating the extra bills it's getting. But I just always do try to keep in mind that at some point, we need to at least, we've talked at different times about having discussion with the county and other taxing entities so we can, and understand we don't have a property tax, but we benefit from the sales tax, about understanding collective burden on the community when all of these various bills are increasing and, maybe your income isn't. So I just was going to put in another plug for that at some point, just to keep us all thinking about collective burden and the fact that we probably do need to be having more conversations, and not like for the city, there are a lot of tools we have to control that. We have to pay our bills and we have to pay our haulers, and we appreciate that Canyonlands Solid Waste is doing their best to provide a living wage. And, we all say in the community, that's what we want. And that's what we want more of. But I just feel like it was a good letter in turn, because it did have one person spell out all of the small increases and how that's collectively making things cost prohibitive for them. And I don't know, if this is someone who would qualify for a break, according, and we've talked a little bit about some fee waivers too. So anyway, I mean, I understand people have to pay their bills. I will vote for this, but at the same time, I do kind of want to keep it on our plates that we do have to kind of keep talking about this, because we are kind of slowly moving down the path, and I don't know if there's a way off it, but where, more and more people over time can't afford the increases. So it just changes, our community dynamics, but I understand we got to pay our bills. So that was just it. But I thought it was a good letter if people haven't read it, to just understand one
Point
person's
well
burden.
taken, and I think we are looking at ways that we can develop a program to help provide some relief for those folks that are on fixed incomes and may not be able to afford these kinds of increases.
Treasurer's office has one program in place, don't we, Ben?
Yeah.
Uh,
It's for heat.
Is it, is
Yeah.
it like heat? Okay.
But I think there's other opportunities, and we just
Yeah.
need to to continue down that path and see if we can come up with something.
No, and I do appreciate that the Waste Authority mentioned this too the last time. So
Right.
partially if this person is listening, but also because I know that other people in the community are having similar struggles and thoughts. You know.
Right. All right, we have a motion made by Tawny to consider ordinance, approve ordinance 2023-02 and ordinance amending the Moab Municipal Code 3.50.120 trash and recycling rates, seconded by Luke. I'm gonna call for the vote. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Great, thanks, Ben. All right, next up, where's Chuck? He's out in the hallway. Okay.
Turn your sound up.
All right.
No, it can't. We heard it.
No, it isn't. You're echoing. Okay. All right. So what we have now is consideration.
Let me do it.
All right, hold off. Mute. Thanks, you guys. Are you muted? Yes, okay, very good. All right, so tonight, as you guys recall, at our last meeting, Chuck presented us with a couple of options for stormwater rate options. And we directed staff to look at option 1 and option 2 to come up with a recommendation or what those options would provide us with. If we, whatever option you guys choose tonight, what kind of projects we'd be able to accomplish based on what you decide. And so tonight I want us to focus on that rate structure. And so then that's going to move forward to a public hearing. Whatever you guys decide tonight needs to go before the public. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
As a public hearing. And so we can get into a lot of detail at that time. So tonight I don't really want to focus on the specifics of each project or the need or the priorities. I just want us to really focus on the options and look at what those projects would be and not into the detail of each project. So Chuck, there you go.
Great, thank you. So after the last council meeting, we went back and tried to address your comments. And I sent that to you in terms of PDF of a PowerPoint, which I'd like to go through. And one thing I think is probably worth reiterating is these are stormwater rates, which are collected on a monthly basis by all the residents. And then we'll be coming also, we've done an impact fee study. And this rates and these projects I'm going to show you are existing problems that we have as documented in the Stormwater Master Plan. The impact fees are to we collect from developers for their contribution to future problems, if you will. So they're two separate things. Think about rates in terms of fixing the problems we have now. Think about impact fees as developers' contributions as they build out, as they, impact our system where we need to do upgrades to our system based upon some new developments. So tonight, we're talking about rates, and in the future, we'll be coming back to you with impact fees information. And this is to give us some direction so we can finalize the rate study, and we'll come back again before you. Tonight, we're still just trying to get closer to, do you want option 1 or option 2? And then we'll build the rate study, which is 80% done around that. Because the rate study only wants to have one option and it doesn't want to have a list of all the options in it that we've gone through. So kind of, if that makes sense, I wanted to have that as a little bit of a background. So I'd like to. I'd like to share my screen. Not seeing it. Yeah, there we go. So this is option number 1. And this is the option that we essentially showed you last time. We did make a correction. We had in that the rate was $4 per month currently, and it's $4.50 a month. So we went back to it and confirmed that. And then we moved through, and again, we want a debt service ratio there of greater than 1.5. The bonding companies like to have, and days cash on hand, we like to have over 180 days. And you can see that in the middle there that, you know, it's really well covered, but the other time frame not so much. And this is a 10-year scenario from 2023 out to 2032. And then the projects that go along with that are these projects. And what we were able to do to address council's comments last time was the projects that we have it here on the right, the original year, and then the year that they would be completed under the option scenario, option 1 scenario. So nothing changed in these front end projects because those were the high, but we were able to move these projects that were going to be built in 2029 or 2030, able to move them all forward to 2025 or 2026, with a couple of them going from 2030 to 2024. So the back end projects that we showed you last week can all get moved forward to within 5 years to be addressed under this option 1. Because the question was, if we go with option 1, which was a higher rate, is there a benefit in getting the projects done earlier? Was the question that was one of the questions that was asked last council meeting. And here to show you, we can move projects from the back end to the front or to the middle by going with the option 1, which was the go from $4.50 a month to $9 a month. And then it would have the 2% increase, then a 2% increase thereafter, up to 0% increase. And then this is option 2, which is a 75% increase in the first year from $4.50 to $7.88 per month, with 5% increases thereafter. And again, we have the debt service coverage ratio that we need, which is the all green there, and the days cash on hand. So that works in terms of bonding. And these are the projects, and what we were only able to do with this was move 4 2029 projects up to 2025. So it does still let us move some of the back end projects to the middle, but not as many as in option 1. And then the other thing we did, and you know, this is not by any means a comprehensive state of Utah survey. Our consultant wasn't scoped for that, but we did ask them, have they done rate studies recently in the last couple of years in various parts of the state? And they had this information available, so we just thought we'd share it with you. In terms of the current fee for us is $4.50, Cedar City is $7, St. George is $4.50, Ivans is $14.05, and then Payson is $6.19.
Can I also mention, I don't know details about these rates and their history. One problem that we have is it's an equity problem, but it's an intergenerational equity issue. For a couple decades, we have not been levying the stormwater rates to match the cost of service for the system that we need. And because for decades we have not been paying into it, the burden is falling onto this current generation. So when we're talking about these kinds of rates and everything, you know, ours might be a little pricier, but it might be because we're just catching up to, you know, the decisions of people who came far before us, but just were not necessarily prioritizing stormwater like they should have been. And like the money is what it is, you know, and now we've got to kind of catch up to it, and we've lost time doing that, and we're just sort of catching up. So just some perspective on why rates kind of might look a certain way.
Yeah, and the projects that we proposed up there are from the Stormwater Master Plan, which was existing conditions, which was adopted, I believe, in 2017. So that's 5 years old, and we've updated the cost with inflationary numbers anyway. So the numbers on here from the 2017 costs have been updated. And while this project list is from the plan, it doesn't mean that say you choose one or two, 3 years from now, we have a flood or a drainage problem that, you know, rises its ugly head, and we say, that's the priority. We insert that because we do the 5-year we do the capital improvement program every year. And that's where that comes in. This is the best list we have right now of known problems based on that master plan. And I say that just so you understand that while these projects are what we're building around, it doesn't mean that in the future there can't be other projects. In fact, almost likely will be over time, because something will fail.
So is the detail of these projects in the stormwater master plan?
Yes.
So
it
if
is.
public wants to know exactly what these projects entail, they can go to that master plan online
Yes.
and get that detail.
It's online, it's under our engineering department, as a report, and we talk about what the deficiencies are, what the locations are, and what the solutions are.
Right.
You know, 1,100 feet of 36-inch pipe needed here
Right.
to address it. So that's all in there.
Okay, great,
And if people have questions, I'm happy to, you can call my office and talk it through,
great.
you know.
Questions for Chuck? Ronnie?
I might as well ask a few. Can you go back to the plan, Chuck, where you show the, what is it, the 11 or the 14 highlighted, projects, not this one, but the option one.
Yes.
So maybe a silly question, but Dogwood, Hale, and Biddle, they show as being original year and still the year as 2027 or 2028. And so since option one talks about, making more projects doable by 2025 or 2026, I just wanted to know, are they somehow deemed less important projects? Because it looks like they will stay 2027, 28. So all these other projects that were originally, it just looks to the layperson like they were originally prioritized later, will jump ahead of ones of these 3 that were prioritized before them. So I was just curious what.
And that's
Yeah.
because we needed to make the money fit into the bond program, because with this rate study, we envisioned 2 bonds, a bond in 2024 and then a bond in 2027, I think. And in order to meet those, and I think it's 4 million for 2024 and 2 million for 2026. Those wouldn't fit. So we went and did the best fit of projects and moving them forward, including the costs as well as the prioritization. And that's why I said a few minutes ago that the real outcome is when we go to the bond, assuming council does something, we'll go to a bond project, and then you'll see what those bond projects are, and we'll talk in detail about those projects. It might not be number 1. It might be 2, 3, and 4 is what I'm suggesting to you based on the amount of money. Like number 2 is a $1.8 million project, 100 south of Mill Creek. That one most certainly I would envision being in a bond project, just because we can never save enough money to pay for a project like that if we don't bond. Whereas some of the smaller ones, potentially like the Cane Creek Boulevard one at 198,000, or the 200 south to 200 east at 76,000. We wouldn't probably bond those smaller projects. We bond the bigger projects. And that's why a couple of them, those ones you mentioned, did get included and moved up.
Okay. I'm going to ask, because I asked this on the shared document, and now it sounds like there's a preference that we not do this tonight. But honestly, as someone who has to vote on this and decide, is it better to go with option 1 or option 2 in terms of direction? To me, to be transparent to the voters, it's not really enough to get to the meeting and be told, oh, I can look at the stormwater plan, or the public can, because it's hard for me to say to a voter tomorrow, oh yeah, but you're going to get 11 projects instead of 4 if we go, since we voted for option 1. And then they say to me, oh, well, what is Rose Tree Lane? And I say, oh, I don't know. So honestly, to me, it's better leadership in government to spend 5 or 10 minutes to just do a brief description of what each of these are. So that would be my preference, because I have a hard time voting and deciding that it's worth putting that much more money forward with option one than two, not really understanding the weight of that. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about process? So the motion is the recommended motion is to direct staff to follow the process to increase the fees. And so this would include a public hearing.
Right.
And so there would be an opportunity where we've advertised to the public, and maybe at that time we would have interested parties here for Chuck to present that more detailed information, right?
Yeah, but tonight I'm being asked to,
Can I please
yeah.
finish? I favor option one because it is the higher rate for the next 5 years. And so if the public shows up and speaks in opposition to it, it gives this council some leeway to go with option two, because we will have advertised at the higher rate. If we direct staff to follow the process for option two and we want to downshift, then we're back to option three potentially, which at our last meeting or whenever it was, we kind of took off the table. But depending on how we respond to the interested citizens that show up, who tend to be the ones who are in favor of less spending versus better services, we might be back at less services. So I think there is an opportunity to do a better presentation to the public, but I'm in favor of moving forward at this time.
Is that a motion?
Not yet.
Okay. Other questions?
I'm going to
Carly, go
disagree
ahead.
because I feel like I get paid a decent salary to be here twice a month. It's not a big time ask for me. I mean, I do spend a crap load of time doing other stuff between meetings, but to me, to spend 10 minutes in a meeting right now up front at the beginning of this process is appropriate leadership. So I'm just going to say that.
Great. Carly.
I would say, these projects on the stormwater master plan, they are all something that we need to buy. A determination has already been made that we need to purchase all of these in order to be responsible stewards of the stormwater system. So you can have a high level of confidence that they're all worth spending money on. And, the council, a previous council has already determined when we do it. So really the question ahead of you is like, how quickly do you want to tick off these projects that you have already determined, you being the city council, the city have already determined are of the highest priority and the most immediacy. So a lot of the process has already happened in determining their value, their need. And now we're just sort of saying, okay, we've already made that decision. How do we pay for it and how quickly? It's just maybe kind of two steps of this process for our stormwater infrastructure. So
And I, tell me if I'm wrong, but the original rate study that came out in 2017 or whatever they said that we weren't charging enough. And we should have been incrementally raising these rates each year to be where we are now at $9. And things weren't changed. And so now we're kind of faced with, hey, we need to be where we should have been, or working towards since 2017. And it puts the burden on us to kind of make that up and stuff. And I kind of, for me, as I look at these projects and stuff like that, I kind of go, man, these projects should have been happening. If we'd have been doing this stuff, this list would be a lot smaller. This list would be, way reduced. And as we've had things that have come up, with stormwater issues over the last so many years, how much money have we spent that we could have saved had we been doing these projects, over the last 8 or 9 years? And so I agree with Kaylin, in that, we've been charged with making up this deficiency and get the ball rolling to get things going so that in 8 or 9 years from now, we have a sufficient stormwater system and we're rebuilding it constantly to keep up with where we should be. I mean, that it sucks that we've been stuck with this decision, but I think it's a decision we need to get on board with.
Yeah. And Chuck, are these totals kind of based off of current construction rates, or just because I know like since the pandemic has happened, like materials costs and everything have skyrocketed?
Yes, so as part of this process that we've been going through in the rate study, we took the 2017 numbers, put inflationary factors on for the 5 years in between, and we've increased them to what we believe are today's rates.
Okay.
We won't know till we go to bid, and some of these are 2 years out still, but yes, we have done the best we could, our consultants and us, to bring them into current costs.
Because like I've been doing like a little bit of digging. It seems like overall construction rates since the beginning of the pandemic have ballooned by like 30 something %. And so ideally, if certain like supply chains kind of get in better shape, I think potentially with interest rates having skyrocketed themselves, there might be a little bit more materials available as well. So some of those prices can potentially go down later on down the road. But I do think it makes sense to kind of front load right now to get as much work done as possible, because as you said, there are going to be other things that are going to fail along the way. And who knows what's going to happen. There is not a lot of stability in the economy. And so I think that kind of gives us this room where we're either kind of setting ourselves up to do as many of these things as possible. And if construction rates do go down, then we do have the ability to account for the things that come along the way, or even potentially move some of the other projects up later on down the road. I think kind of factoring in that commercial properties are going to be reassessed next year, people's property tax burdens are going to be going down, ideally, within like the residential neighborhoods. And so I think the overall impact that our residents are going to see in terms of their like year over year spending, ideally, this isn't going to be a big hit to them. Ideally, they'll still see an overall decrease based on like a property tax decrease.
And I agree with Kaylin. I think that the people that are interested in the specifics of those projects are the ones that will come to public hearing, and they can have their questions answered, and that's the appropriate place. And I also agree with Jason and Luke that, you know, we as a body, and it isn't necessarily any one of us, it's councils that came before us and some of us that have been on for a couple of terms. We just haven't increased with our costs. It's just been easy to say, let's just kind of push that one off till next year and we'll deal with it next year. And now it's next year. So I think I think we have to move forward. We can't keep pushing it backwards.
So Chuck, in light of Ronnie's concerns, could you, like, without going into detail about every project, can you kind of give us like a briefing of what all these entails? Like, they're going to need a trench built and a pipe put in, and it's going to help with the drainage. I mean, is there a way that you can kind of summarize, you know, very briefly or not?
Well, I have a list that talks about what the deficiencies are and the solutions are, but I can't do it in 5 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, I can, if you pick a project you wanted to know, I could look it up and share it with you, and I can send you that list, but it won't take 5 or 10 minutes. It'll take.
Right.
Okay, I'll pick 3 just to give me and the audience some idea, since not everybody's a stormwater expert. How about we pick randomly Rose Tree? Let's start there.
Which one did you say, Ronnie?
Rose Tree.
I want to make sure I need the project number off of it.
P38.
P36.
Oh, 36.
P36. Okay. Yeah, tell me.
You're telling me that's not an 8.
So.
Yeah, even the descriptions aren't very helpful because you don't understand the problem they're trying to solve. So you might be like, install inlet.
Right.
Maybe that's not very meaningful.
So it's P36?
Yeah.
So it's a dirt road extending from Rose Tree Lane east behind the residential lots along the north side of Arches Drive is the location. The ditch and dirt road experienced significant erosion during storm, which is deposited in the bubble up and curb and gutter in Rose Tree Lane.
We've
Was it-
gotten emails on this. Do you remember during the,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
this is the road that we have to maintain that keeps kind of eroding over time.
So the solution is regrade the road, install a roadside ditch with erosion control measures, i.e. riprap. Replace the bulb upland Rose Tree Lane with a higher invert elevation so debris and sediment doesn't fill the outlet. And so that's the deficiencies and the solutions. So
Okay, cool. That was helpful. For someone who didn't know anymore, can I just pick two more? Just to
Sure.
give me an idea around the city. I'll just pick something on a different side of town.
what is that?
I don't know. You
Oh,
got a
that's you.
sponsored session. How about Bowling Alley Lane in Biddle? Just move to a different section of town.
Is it
That's P30.
P30?
Oh, finally,
Yeah.
yes.
That's P30.
Oh,
You were just looking at the wrong one.
I was prognosticating what was going to be guessed.
Stormwater bingo. Figure.
Yeah, there's like 30 projects, which is why I said we couldn't get it in. And I'm happy to send you all this spreadsheet if that would be helpful.
We could also send in the plan too.
Yeah.
yeah, I could use the spreadsheet. That way, if I get questions from a resident in a particular neighborhood interested.
So P38, it's the the area is the intersection of Bowling Alley Lane and Biddle Lane.
Mhm.
Flows in the curb and gutter on the west side of Bowling Alley Lane over top Biddle Lane diagonally and flood the driveways west of the storm drain inlets north of Biddle Lane. Solution is regrade, Biddle Lane to provide a cross pan that directs flows to the existing storm drain inlet north of Bowling Alley Lane. And because of that's near the city limit boundary, we'd have to coordinate with Grand County on that. Because as we all know, waters cross jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay, cool. Can I just pick one other one? I'll pick one from the west side of town, maybe.
Pick an expensive one.
Well,
like-
I'm not going by money. I'm just trying to pick different parts of town, but here, I'll see if I can, here, you can pick one, Mayor.
How about 500 west and 400 north?
Alright.
P18.
P18. $1 million project, replace the existing 30-inch pipe with 3,300 feet of new 30-inch pipe with a steeper slope. Replace the inlet near Holiday Drive with 55 feet of 24-inch pipe. This project's in coordination with project P32, which is down here on Hale Avenue. And this extends from 400 north from 500 west to the outfall by the treatment plant. The city has identified storm drains and needs of repair from 500 west to Holiday Drive. The model shows the storm drain at Holiday Drive is not having sufficient capacity, so the storm drain's undersized. Hale Avenue experiences flooding. And the solution is replace the existing 30-inch pipe with 3,300 feet of new 30-inch pipe. Replace the inlet near Holiday Drive with 55 feet. And again, the project's in coordination with P32. So we would probably do both those projects at the same time is what that's suggesting.
Was Hale, though, one of the ones that we didn't think we would get to?
Let me see.
I think that might have been one of the ones that was the 2027, 28, but maybe there's more than one Hale one. If you go up above the orange highlights or the yellow highlights, two above that,
Yeah, Hale Avenue.
400, I guess.
2028. So we have the information. It's just,
Yeah, thanks. That's educational. Yeah, if you don't mind sending me the spreadsheet, I'll look at it.
I'd be happy to send it all the council members. If that's okay
Great.
with you.
That would be great.
Yep.
I think it's important to, at least give the public, as Ronnie suggested, some idea of what we're talking about. Because people hear stormwater, they don't quite get that. So, but for time's sake, I don't want to spend the time to go through all of them tonight.
Yeah.
And the public will have an opportunity to address that or look into that information.
And there are maps in the stormwater master plan that show this graphically too. So it's not just all text. So if someone wants to look at
Right.
it graphically, that's there too.
So hopefully that sufficed, Ronnie, for this evening. Okay, any other questions? I'll ask for a motion.
I move to direct staff to follow the process to increase the city of Moab's stormwater fees from $4.50 per ERU to $9 per ERU in 2024 and in future years as identified in alternative one as presented today.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Kalen, seconded by Jason. Any further discussion, Kalen?
No.
Jason?
No.
Anybody else? Call for the vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, so we'll look to you for direction for the public hearing. We're thinking that's going to be in March. One of our March meetings, probably the last
Probably the
meeting.
last one is my guess.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right. Ugh. We are moving right along. We've got 3 items from the planning department. And as I mentioned earlier, if Senate Bill 174 passes, these 3 items will not be up for consideration for council. So this may be, well, I don't know when that law, if it passes, when it'll go into effect, probably in April. So we may not be seeing any more of these administrative approvals in the future. The first item is consideration of resolution 05-2023, a resolution approving a lot line adjustment for parcels located at 809 Westwood Avenue in Moab, Utah, 84532. And this is, my understanding is this is an owner of a property on Westwood that would like to adjust the lot line so that they can build a duplex on their property for workforce housing. Is that correct?
Well, as far as we have a process of planning application.
Right, but that's what they're, that's what they're,
To make them more buildable lot versus such a narrow lot.
correct. Yes, right. All right, do we need Corey to give you more information on this? Ask for a motion?
I can make one. I move that the council approve Moab City Resolution 05-2023, a resolution approving a lot line adjustment of properties located at 809 Westwood with the condition of approval that the property boundary descriptions are verified.
Motion by Ronnie, second.
Second.
Seconded by Caitlin. Discussion, Ronnie? Nope. Caitlin?
Nope.
Anybody else? I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion to approve resolution 05-2023.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, this next one is a little more complicated because it's a little unusual. And this is consideration of resolution 06-2023, a resolution approving the phase 1 final plat for Abdi subdivision of property located at 1241 East Powerhouse Lane. Again, this is administrative approval. And so Corey, can you kind of just briefly explain why this is a little different and a little more complicated?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As this is a final planning approval of a certain phase, what we're basing this off of was the 2019 preliminary subdivision, so a major subdivision application process. Within the context of the framework, why this is a little bit more cumbersome is the way in which the standards of requirement for development are outlined in that subdivision ordinance are a bit antiquated as far as the steps for approval, meaning just over ownership and subdivision, subdivision improvement agreement statute. So with some of the conditions of approval, they blend into what would be a plan approval versus plat. So the distinguishing elements I want to make here that we maintain in a PUD, MPD, PADS, really all of our more contemporary application formats is that there is a platting mechanism and a plan mechanism, and they typically go in tandem, meaning the preliminary platting and plan go to the planning commission both at the same time. The plans having construction and development designs, and then the platting really being an ownership mechanism for the county and ownership overlays, as well as the engineering department for their construction documents for public improvements. Where we're in the final stage here is that the final platting is being submitted, but there are no construction plans at this point attached to that. The major subdivision application process essentially allows them to do that. It's in a format that we are looking to adjust and make it a cleaner, more concise process that matches some of our other contemporary application formats. So when we're looking at this tonight, I know there were some questions about some of the conditions of approval specifically related to landscaping. And I did address that in some of council questions that we had, but it was so late. I'm not sure if everyone had a chance to review those, but similar, a good example might be like dark sky. If we don't have a building design generated, it'd be really challenging for us to have a complete lighting plan, which in the subdivision approval context means it would probably be maybe not even go through a planning approval, but through a building permit process. Again, as the mayor mentioned through the state statutes, we aren't likely to be seeing these processes go through this full planning commission public hearing and the city council approval because it's all administrative. If they meet the code provisions within the sections of underlying zoning and then major subdivision, it meets the code, it must be approved. So this is where we're going to today is just the ownership elements, none of the plan designs, even though some of the preliminary approvals seem to imply that we would be seeing some of those. I guess to go through it further, there are a few other interesting components that were brought up by council members regarding to how the plat was identified in some of these preliminary reviews, specifically to unit counts. The original narrative was submitted in, I believe, a context that was maintained even prior to the final preliminary plat being identified, meaning they submitted a plan and it did not have the final design in yet. They had what was published as 66 single units, 16 twin homes, and we saw that even tweaked from plan to plan. But this is the preliminary plat that was approved at Planning Commission at 2019 after the public hearing. I've broken this into numbers, so it's a little bit easier to identify. You can see all those red digits. Those are the twin home lots, and they numbered 36. Then the orange lots, they number at 59. And then the green lots in the right-hand corner, the estate lots, those are numbered at 4 lots in green. That is consistent when we go to the next slide. This is from their current phasing plan, identifying in wrapped green for phase 1. You'll see those unit designations are exactly the same. So what the issue in the context there was how they were describing their lots. The way we describe twin home lots is a subcategory of lot, meaning lot 13A or 13B versus a standard lot is just lot 13. The mixed definitions made this very confusing, and that carried through all of the narrative submittals and agenda summary. So it was a record keeping I got with engineering, and we made sure every plan was consistent. It was matched and correlated to what their preliminary approval was, and that is what they're proposing. So among the oddity of how we're approving this without any construction plans, there was also additional confusion on how they were describing these particular lots. In some places it showed 16, some 28. The matter of fact is I'd like to call it 36 twin home lot options, meaning sublot options, 59 standard lots, and 4 estate lots. That is what was approved and is being proposed and will continue to be part of the plan unless they go to amend that further, which they'll have to come back for. Mayor, I know that kind of was a bit of a tangent in 2 different arenas, but those were the major points I wanted to hit. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to address them. I know there were some from Kaylin and some from Ronnie that I didn't get to. I will stop sharing just for sake of discussion.
Questions?
Yeah, I can read this one that was on the shared document from me. Thanks for putting relevant code in our packets. Because it's there, I read it, but maybe I shouldn't. So I read this bit on Moab Municipal Code 16.08.010C, which states within 1 year after, and this is more for my education, because I assume since we're here, this was taken care of. Within 1 year after preliminary plat approval, unless such time is extended by the Planning Commission, the subdivider shall submit final plat to the Planning Commission for final approval or disapproval. So just to me as a layperson, when I was reading this, I just got confused because this whole process started in 2019. It looks like preliminary plat was approved August 22nd of 2019. Final plat submission was in 2021. So I'm assuming there was an extension in there, but I just thought since you guys give me this stuff, I should ask.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. And there was. The Planning Commission did approve a 1-year extension in the early time frame where the project was not at a point they were moving forward. And then following that 1-year extension into 2021, they did start advancing actual submittals, and they had been coordinating with the engineering department that whole time. But essentially from that resubmittal or at least resubmittal of engineering documents to advance their final plat for phase one. They kept it rolling, but if you can think, and no offense to the applicants, but kind of like a rock skipping on the surface of the water, they would make just enough contact that we were advancing this project, but at a slower rate than what is typical, but they stayed within those thresholds of preventing their project from lapsing. Nora, the previous planning director, was committed to making sure that did not lapse. And then into 2022, we were into that final plating discussions. I know the mayor is aware and admin that we've had this on the agenda for a long time, trying to sort out the subdivision improvements agreement. So things like that, especially when we're getting to the details, that's the reason for such a long
Okay.
period.
And my only other question that I had on that shared list was for the attorneys. I don't know if the attorney's on the line tonight.
Nathan, are you here?
I'm on the line.
So this question's for you, Nathan. So I appreciate all the information in here. Seemed all good about flooding, floodplains. You know, I know the engineers have looked at it. There were references to the drainage plan. Finished floor elevations have to be above the floodplain elevation. Chuck has or will issue a floodplain permit. All of that said, in the era of climate change, my question for you, Nathan, is if at some point some of these lots do flood, does the city have liability or not?
He said his link just crashed. He's gonna try to log on.
Okay, someone else can go ahead then.
Are you talking flooding from Mill Creek?
Mhm.
Okay.
Or other stormwater, you know what I mean? But presumably that's where it would come from topographically.
Right.
My guess is no.
Well, the attorney can handle it when they come back, but somebody else can ask the question since Corey and Anna are here. Yeah.
Speaking maybe not for Nathan, but as far as staff goes, the answer is no. No. Yeah, Chuck.
So regarding the map FEMA floodplain, which is what Mill Creek is.
Yeah.
The city's ordinance, is the minimum FEMA ordinance that's allowed. So my belief is that if we're complying with the federal guidelines and reviewing this drainage, which we are, and the applicant has complied with them or will comply with them in future phases, I think our liability, you know, anybody can file a lawsuit, but I think we're in a strong position because we're doing what FEMA wants us to do.
Right. Nathan's back.
Nathan, the question was, if we are following FEMA guidelines for stormwater requirements, is that the right way to say it, Chuck?
Yep.
Stormwater requirements, and it floods, would we be liable? It's sort of a hard question. It's gonna.
So is the city liable for flooding due to stormwater?
Yeah, if it floods, yeah, if the flood overtakes our FEMA required stormwater system.
Yeah, there's an express provision in the Governmental Immunity Act regarding stormwater. And so typically the cities are not liable for that type of thing, particularly if we're following what FEMA's already asked for. I think the Governmental Immunity Act presumes that, look, there are things that cities just aren't going to be able to handle. I've dealt with a couple situations, not with extreme flooding, but with stormwater that some of my other municipal clients inherited through annexations or other things that flooded. And every time someone tries to sue us, I just say, look, here's the governmental immunity statute, and the issue usually goes away. So with that said, following all the applicable guidelines and requirements is always the best way to go anyway, because there are always exceptions to every rule. So following what FEMA says is the best way to keep that governmental immunity intact.
Okay, thanks we just haven't had that question before in the era of climate change. I just wanted to get educated. Thanks.
Other questions for Chuck, Corey, Nathan, Caitlin?
Chuck. Not so-
He thought he was done.
Good timing.
So I asked a number of questions which had more to do with the construction plans.
Yep.
And so these aren't directly germane to the plat approval, but since this seems to be my opportunity, some of them have to do with just making sure that what I would imagine the city wants to be built will be built. And if there's already, so if you want me to mention what they are, I can refresh your memory.
I didn't get to all your questions, sorry. I think
That's
I got some
okay.
of them. So you had a question about Mill Creek Drive, joining the Abbey subdivision. If residents would want to park on Mill Creek Drive, that'll be a no parking. We'll, once they have the curb gutter and sidewalk in as part of the development, they're gonna have to put in, we'll paint it red. Because we don't want parking on Mill Creek Drive, because that's one of our collectors or arterials, and we've got the bike lanes and there, so.
But the city will, and
We'll just paint it red. That's what we typically do.
so you don't ask the developers to do that.
We can try that.
Okay, and then no parking signs were not identified on the sign plan.
Right, and those are typically, we install those, but
Okay,
we could go back, I think we are gonna have another run at the final construction plan. Do that, but yeah,
Okay.
but I thought the most important thing that you were asking is, is there gonna be parking in Mill Creek Drive? And the answer is no, there won't be.
okay. And then there was some ADA at the Pear Tree intersection with Mill Creek. It didn't seem like there was provisions for there being a pedestrian crossing. Like the ADA ramps weren't called out, and it appears that island where the well is could be a pedestrian refuge, and it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, that's a tough intersection. We talked about that.
Okay.
As staff, we talked about it and internally in engineering, and it's near that curve, right, coming out on Mill Creek. And unless we put in another RRDF crossing beacon, like they're gonna put in on the trail on the other side of Bonita. I'm not comfortable with putting in an intersection there. We think it's better that the pedestrians walk down to the RRDF if they're trying to get to the other side.
I'm just talking about
Right.
crossing Pear Tree Lane on the development side.
On the development side, I'll
Yeah.
look at that.
Okay, thanks. And then I wondered why there was a speed table on fire. There was a speed table on one of the private lanes, which seems like it's going to be pretty low volume, but not a speed table on Powerhouse.
Yeah, and again, we went back and forth on that one. Powerhouse is at 20 miles an hour, posted at 20 miles an hour. We've never been informed that it's a speeding problem on Powerhouse Lane. It's a volume problem for the residents, right? People going up to the trail and everything. So we didn't think that was a very good solution for
Okay.
Powerhouse Lane based upon the low speeds.
Okay. Glad you thought about it. Thanks.
We did, yeah.
Any other questions for planning staff?
I realize Chuck, this is probably out of the scope of this, but because we won't be allowing parking on Mill Creek, and I know the Mill Creek Community Collaborative has been, rethinking access to the Mill Creek recreation area along the creek. We should then just be aware, right? Okay.
Yeah, parking along, and during special events, and that's probably the wrong term to use, but if, there's people make arrangements and to allow parking and the police department is there to help, there can be.
No, I'm just saying as residents, we've all seen the vehicle overflow, especially after we disallowed parking on Powerhouse, seeping out onto Mill Creek. So, okay.
Other questions? Motion.
I move to approve Moab City Resolution 06-2023, a resolution approving the Phase 1 final plat for the Abbey subdivision of property located at 1241 East Powerhouse Lane, Moab, Utah, 84532.
Second? Second by Luke. All right, motion made by Kalen to approve resolution 06-2023, seconded by Luke. Any further discussion, Kalen?
Nope.
Luke?
No.
Anybody else? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And our last item of business tonight is 6.6, consideration of resolution 07-2023, a resolution approving Aggie Townhomes final plat of property located at approximately Aggie Boulevard, 1492 South Highway 191, Moab, Utah, 84532. Questions? Do you guys need a briefing on this? Would you like a briefing?
I don't, I want to make a motion. Don't know if I got enough oomph left.
And Part had a question just about how this is listed on the agenda versus the motion in our packet. So I guess our motion references approving the subdivision plat, but the way this is in our agenda, it says we're
Final plat.
yeah, so what should the motion say?
Corey?
So it could
Anna?
actually be either thing. It's just the fact that city council is viewing it, it is going to be a final plat or reviewing it. So if you want to make it clear that it's a final plat, we can include it, but it's not absolutely necessary.
Include.
Find the word find.
Well, I think the question is, it
Says
says
subdivision
subdivision as
versus
opposed to
plat.
townhomes.
Townhomes are unique, is it's an ownership overlay similar to that of condominiums. Condominiums following, of course, a different process. Townhomes being a bit of a hybrid between a land subdivision and a condominium of space or ownership overlay. So within our framework, and I've checked this with Nathan, and this will likely be lumped into what is our new state statutes as far as reduced
Okay.
administrative. It is a division of land, but it is a ownership layer, so it does not have full rights of a
So
subdivision.
it looks like it should say townhome subdivision. Final plat.
That,
The townhome final plat or townhome
So what this
subdivision?
motion says is townhome subdivision plat.
But
I
the
would
agenda item says
prefer to say
final plat.
townhome final plat is how I, for my records, because that would clarify this is the final action you're taking approval on.
So it's on the agenda. What's on the agenda? You gave me the other one. We just, right.
I move that city council approve Moab Resolution 07-2023, a resolution approving the Aggie Townhome subdivision final plat for property located at approximately Aggie Boulevard, 1492 South, Highway 191, Moab, Utah, 84522.
Motion by Tawny. Do I have a
I'll second it.
Seconded by Jason. Discussion, Tawny?
Nope.
Jason?
No, the only thing I want to make it, a point is that I would like to see, like Joe, Kingsley brought up, is that, even though UDOT is, we think they are looking at putting a light in, maybe the city write a letter in regards to this development saying we need a light at this intersection.
Yeah, you guys can study the history on that. I don't know, Tawny and Kaylin might remember, but either in 2016 or 2017, early when we came on, UDOT did a presentation of us of the long-term vision for streetlights, and that one was included. So we were always under the impression that it would be happening, but it's remained unclear about when it was going to happen. So there've been meetings since where we thought, oh yeah, it's getting closer. And then it seems to drop off again. So just know, some of us were under the impression we were promised that it was coming. Yeah, Chuck might have something else,
But just
but
even a letter,
yeah.
just saying.
so
like,
we were
hey,
always told a full light.
Yeah, just push them a
Yeah.
little bit more.
It's happening.
If I may?
Yeah.
On that, that traffic signal is something we've been pushing really hard with UDOT. It's in their southeastern Utah Regional Transportation Plan as a high priority. And it's in our Unified Transportation Plan with the county as a high priority. And I had a discussion with the new traffic engineer in Region 4 6 weeks ago, for the holidays, whatever. And what they're open to the idea, and I've had preliminary discussions with various developers about if the money were made available, then UDOT would consider doing it. And they would, so as an example, if we had money laying around and we wanted to put that traffic signal in, UDOT could help find a way to put the traffic signal in for their consultants, for their contracts. And I had some very preliminary conversations with the developers suggesting that they may want to participate too, because I don't think we have a legal mechanism to make them do so. I'm not the attorney, but I don't think we could make them do that. But we think it's as this area develops, that's why the more it develops, the more it becomes clear we need the traffic signal, because people will be out there. So we're trying to pull that together right now. But I'm not suggesting you don't do a letter. I just wanted to give you full information.
Yeah, I'm just saying a letter that pushes this along because, you know, I don't want to put in a development that puts, you know, 50 families or whatever's in that development, you know, that, you know, can't get out on the
Can't
highway.
get out.
And just, you know, years ago,
I know.
many of
I
us were
know
under the
exactly.
impression that was promised to
But
us.
I'm just
so-
saying that now's the time
Yeah.
to put, you know, with this, you know, like, hey, UDOT, this development's going in, we need this light.
Yeah, and so what they're doing is this year they're putting in, and I think I've mentioned this to council, 200 north and 400 north with the traffic signals. Because they were a higher priority in the signal study that was done in 2016. But once those two are in, this is the next priority because it's on all the plans. So I think it will happen sooner rather than later. So then we're trying to work it as staff behind the scenes too.
Yeah, I understand everybody's doing it. I'm just saying it's always good to give it a push.
Yeah.
And in light of what's happened in the last 6 hours.
Right. All right, we have a motion to consider resolution 07-2023 made by Tawny, seconded by Jason. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, thanks you guys. Thanks, Anna. That's the end of our general business, and now we'll move on to administrative reports with Carly.
Good evening. First up is an update on some water shutoffs that have are ongoing up near 4th East and 300 South. These shutoffs were required to repair a broken water valve on 400 East and 300 South. It's taking place today through Thursday, so different segments of the city are being impacted. One segment is today, one is tomorrow, one is the next day. All impacted residents and businesses have been notified that the water is being shut off from about 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I know it's really inconvenient, and that whole neighborhood has received a lot of inconsistency in their service because of the Mill Creek water line or the flood or the construction around it. So we really appreciate their patience because we realize how much work it's been for them and how inconvenient it has been. If there might be other people living in that area that may experience lower water pressure, just know that that's kind of normal part of it. You can call us, but we'll just let you know that it's temporary and should just last for the day. Customers may experience discolored water and air in the tap water. So just run the water from the tap until it clears and it should be fine. It's just a normal part of the process as we relink everything up. The deadline for applications to be submitted to the city RAP Tax Advisory Committee is tomorrow. The committee will evaluate those applications and make recommendations to the council. So expect a presentation from them on that, and it'd be really exciting to get some RAP tax money out into the community. We've started construction on Emmett Boulevard a few weeks ago. At this time, we anticipate being completed by Easter. Although we haven't had the best of luck estimating construction timelines, we do realize that. Just for kind of newer council members, this was kind of our share into buying parking spots in order to meet a threshold that UDOT was interested in to match for the downtown dispersed parking project. So it's sort of our fulfillment, a way to get a bunch of parking spots out there. Finally, council laptops. I wanted you to know that we have received, the email thread where you guys were kind of asking about laptops and maybe functionality of agendas. I think step one is probably, I think it's about time we get you all laptops. I also like it as a practice that you are conducting like city business on city laptops. We can work with each of you. They're probably going to look a little like mine, some high functionality, just so you guys have the resources you need to look at council agenda items. We're going to explore more options for you when it comes to like how you interface with the laptops and the agendas, because it sounds like different council members might have a different idea of what they would like. But so we'll just be kind of reaching out to see if we can make it a little more user friendly for each of you. So expect Summer to contact you. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Carly. Council reports. Let's start with you, Luke.
Not a ton going on my end. I participated in the planning commission meeting last week where there weren't any action items. It's kind of just a workshop with the planning commission on identifying priority code amendments that the planning department feels that it can kind of get pushed through pretty quickly. There's some pretty good discussion about all of that. And then I attended the trash and show this past weekend, which was another beautiful reminder of why I love this community and some of the creative minds that we have amongst us, but that's about it.
Great. Thanks, Luke. Jason.
I attended, let's see. Get off my thing here. I've been attending I attended the ULCT meeting. Was that yesterday? Can't remember.
Monday, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, I learned a lot and stuff. It took me a while to figure out how to log onto it and get on there. And then the meeting afterward with the mayor and Nathan, which I thought was really good. And I think that it was all kind of brought up kind of what was going on there. I attended the USU Advisory Council meeting and kind of talked about enrollment and how, again, to what can be done to expand enrollment. And then they talked about graduation. Graduation is, I think, can be held at the Hoodoo, I think is what they said. And Leanna is going to retire, which is huge. So she says it's not common knowledge, but she
No.
no, so sorry. Yeah, that's a huge
Said keep it a secret.
yeah, she said keep it a secret. I can't keep it a secret. No, no, she said that it's not, people are starting to find out about it, about it. So I think July is when she will be leaving, which she'll be sorely missed. I attended a responsible recreation committee meeting last week, and which is pretty interesting. They are working on, some, trail ambassadors and that to get information out about trails for the upcoming season. They're also working on some billboards that are going to be put up in the city regarding, and I think, I don't know, Caleb, have you seen them at all? They talk about like, welcome to Moab, respect our town, type things with some artwork on it. And I know that they're going to present it to the travel council. And I asked them to also present it to the city, just since they're putting billboards in the city, we'd have an idea of what's going to be put up and stuff.
Aren't billboards illegal in our town?
They have 2 billboards already that the county has.
Yeah.
There's one at the north end of town, one that's
Over by Poison Spider, usually see that one has had the,
Grandfather.
They're not new billboards.
they're not the new.
They're just.
one by the
updated.
Fairmont.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So they're redoing those, and so that was really good. And then I attended an airport board meeting last night, but we didn't have a quorum, so it was really short. And that was about it.
Thanks, Jason. Ronnie.
So I didn't bother to put down the date, probably doesn't matter. We had a groundwater and sewer service agency meeting in which manager Jana Van Horn announced her last day will be March 2nd of 2023. She's going to take a job over at Grand County. So thanks so much to Dana, and luckily she'll still be in the community willing to answer questions. Ben Musselman, who's already over at Gwissa, is going to step into that position while the board goes through an official search process. Let's see, most of my life is taken up by the legislative session at the moment. I attend morning, weekly, 10:15 to 10:45 a.m. Legislative briefing calls with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Often Lisa Watts-Batskin, Nathan's colleague, is on those. Very, very informative and helpful to know what's coming up in committee. I've been writing email updates to other council members about the bills and what I learned there. There's some other ones we haven't discussed here, but they're probably less important. But and then every Monday we have Utah League of Cities and Towns Legislative Policy Committee meetings. They're held in Salt Lake, but you can webcast in. I know the mayor was at one of those recently in person, as well as Nathan. Those are also very informative. And then usually on Mondays after that, we have a city legislative group Zoom with the lobbyist and often the attorneys. And Jason and I are on that with the mayor and Carly. I have a lot to say about this legislative session. I will save it, I guess, for when the session ends on Friday. But I think there's a lot of important stuff to pass on and a lot of trends and that the community should be aware of. I guess just short factual stuff for the community is Tuesday of the last week of the session. So today, before midnight, is the last day that bills can theoretically be voted on by a chamber. So theoretically, the last day that the Senate could vote on its bills, or the House on bills that started there. However, the Utah legislature does have an exception to that. I'm going to have a brain fart and forget the name for it, but they have an exception to that. So even though they have a rule, they can decide to change that down to the wire Friday at midnight. The one rule they usually don't break is on a Tuesday by midnight. If a bill has not been heard in committee, it usually will not see life again in this session. However, again, we always have an exception. These are the last days of the session when you tend to see bills that have died sometimes be resurrected in part or in full, stuck into another bill. So it's part of the job of people like the Utah League of Cities and Towns and the county equivalent and lobbyists and elected officials to watch for sneaky crap like that happening. And it does tend to happen often, yes, at the last hour or two. So I just wanted to give kudos to the staff of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. They work their butts off to make sure that cities and towns in Utah, and there are more than 200, are represented, and they're fighting every day for local control, or as close to that as you can get in Utah. And just know a few observations about the current legislature, apparently more in favor of short-term rentals than any legislature before it. Also, more talk about among more individuals about moving in the direction of being one of the states with minimal zoning. And we all know about some of those states and how that has gone. And more to come. I will have some comments for you guys after the session ends.
Thanks, Ronnie. Kaylin.
I attended a solid waste board meeting, and two main items of business were update on discussion about the rate study and approving the purchase of a replacement bulldozer for the Klondike landfill. And then I attended a Community Renewable Energy Agency board special meeting. This is a closed session to discuss a document a long legal document which you will have the pleasure of reviewing in a few weeks. And then Jason and I attended a Parks and Recreation Master Plan kickoff meeting this morning, which I think some of you might have participated in one of these as well. That was fun.
Thanks, Kaylin. Connie.
I attended a museum board meeting, and we said goodbye to two of our long-term board members, and we re-elected officers at that meeting. There are a lot of interesting things that are coming up in the world of the Moab Museum this spring and summer and into the fall. I can't remember what I was not supposed to say and what I could say.
Don't say it, whatever it was.
I think this one's okay. This is going to be an agritourism experience. Livestock built this city, Ag Tour. And this was last week, so I can say this had already happened. So, and then coming up this next month, the future of weather, climate, and water across the generations. And then in April, the museum annual dinner will happen. And I had not ever heard of this gentleman. His name is Joe Wigand, and he is the world's premier Theodore Roosevelt repriser. He will be in town for the dinner. And I think this is the one that I couldn't say I couldn't say who the guest will be because it's not been confirmed. But in May, they'll have International Heritage Breeds Week, which will highlight heritage breeds that were common to our area. So the museum set out to have the museum outside the walls of the museum, and I think that they've done a really good job. And staff has used a lot of creativity and thought outside the box. And I attended a HASU meeting, Housing Authority meeting. It was very brief because they just did the director's report and they had a closed session. So Mary and I left. So I did have some questions about the 2 trailer parks that people were evicted from and are kind of just sitting in a holding pattern, but I will get with Corey and find out that information. That's it.
Thanks, Tawny. For me, I've been participating a lot in the legislative session, and I just want to let staff know that my work with Representative Lyman and Senator Hinkins have been very positive. They seem to be very, very supportive of Moab and the issues that we're dealing with up there. So I just want you and the public to know that I feel real comfortable with the work with them. And, you know, I think that we've got a good place with our representatives here. Carly and Ben and I will be presenting at CIB to ask for the funding for King Creek Boulevard this Thursday. We were supposed to go to Salt Lake, but because of the weather, the meeting is going to be Zoom. So hopefully, when we meet in March, we'll have some good news about that. It sounds pretty positive. I will be welcoming all the people at the Grand Summit tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning. I'm really looking forward to that.
You get to sleep in.
Yeah. No, it'll be good. I think it's a great event, and I really think it's going to be well attended, and August and Ben do a really good job in coordinating that. What else do I have? We've been doing a lot of meetings. We had a future site committee meeting yesterday. Ronnie and I will be going to DC next week on Monday morning, go back on Friday. Now we have a big agenda. We're meeting with a whole lot of folks back there. Also attended the master plan meeting, and we'll bring this up at our next meeting as well. But we do have tentatively the ribbon cutting for the Moab area transit on March 16th at the MIC. So our transit service will begin that day. You guys put that in your calendars. I'll be there.
Sorry, did you have a
Cutting the
time
ribbon.
on that?
We'll be sending out a placeholder for you.
Probably 9 o'clock. We're hoping it's at 9 o'clock. Right, morning. And that's all I have. And we do not have a need for executive session tonight. And so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Motion by Kalen, seconded by Tawny. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, good meeting, good discussions.
So you're a true believer, you stay the blood.